Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Jamie Stice. On April 12, 2011, in the small town of Morgantown, Kentucky, with a population of 2,500, 30-year-old Kathy Coy unexpectedly went into labor while driving. She had to give birth in her car on the side of the road, close to her home. Kathy had little time to call her friend, Shelley Lindsay, to inform her that she was about to give birth and needed help. When Shelley arrived, she was in the back seat of the car, covered in blood and holding her newborn. Sadly, the joy of becoming a mother was short-lived. Kathy noticed that the baby was having trouble breathing, so Shelley quickly called emergency services and drove them to the medical center. Kathy's hopes of motherhood were overshadowed by a grim situation. The doctors were very concerned. The baby's condition was critical. He was taken urgently to the intensive care unit due to breathing difficulties and a low body temperature, known as cold shock, which can be life-threatening. The doctors were not only worried about the newborn but also had concerns for Kathy and her family's emotional state during this crisis. The police arrived to investigate the situation. They went to the home where Kathy's children from a previous marriage lived with their grandmother. Officers spoke with the eldest daughter, 11-year-old Brianna, and her grandmother. The children expressed surprise at their mother's new baby, as they did not believe she was pregnant. They mentioned that she intended to meet with a friend who was also pregnant, but no one knew the friend's name. The situation seemed suspicious. Detectives accessed Kathy's social media account and identified a friend of hers, 21-year-old Jamie Stice, who was pregnant. The police attempted to reach Jamie but were unable to make contact. The detectives subsequently reached out to Jamie's mother, Jeannie. She informed them that her daughter was in the final stages of pregnancy and that she hadn't heard from Jamie since 9:30 that morning. Concerned, she was contemplating reporting her daughter as missing but realized that the police might not act quickly since not enough time had passed. While the investigation was ongoing, detectives spoke with Kathy again to clarify the timeline of the incident from that day. Kathy confirmed that she had given birth. She explained that she had woken up early, saw her husband Shannon off to work around 4:30 a.m., and then left to meet her friend Jamie around 10 a.m. After their meeting, as she was returning home, she began to feel contractions. Kathy stopped at a restaurant to grab a quick bite but felt the need to leave in a hurry. Realizing she wouldn't reach the hospital in time, she called her closest friend for assistance. Shelley, Kathy's friend, recounted that when she received the call for help, she rushed outside and saw Kathy in the back seat of a car. Kathy was not wearing pants, only a bloody shirt, and she held a baby in her arms, who was also covered in blood, as if he had just been born. Shelley noticed the placenta and recognized that her friend needed urgent help, especially since the baby was struggling to breathe. She quickly got into her car and drove to the medical center. Shelley observed that the baby was covered in grass and dirt but assumed he had fallen and gotten dirty in the car. There was no time to learn more. Her priority was supporting the newborn. Both women's accounts were largely similar, with one key difference. Kathy claimed that Shelley delivered the baby, while Shelley denied this. The situation was chaotic, with Kathy in labor crying out, and both her and the baby's conditions creating confusion. While doctors worked to assist the baby, Kathy pleaded with them to save his life. There were concerns about whether the situation was staged, leading to the decision to take Kathy in for questioning at the station. At that time, Kathy had already been examined by doctors, and her condition seemed stable. However, when the police began questioning her about her friend Jamie on social media, her story started to change. Initially, she claimed that she had only briefly met Jamie before ending their friendship. Kathy explained that she had driven Jamie to the Social Security office, dropped her off near the building, and then Jamie had left in an unknown direction. At that point, Kathy began to experience contractions, which forced her to leave abruptly. This part of her story raised doubts. To support her new version, Kathy presented a message from Jamie, which allegedly asked her to pick Jamie up from the Social Security office, a request Kathy refused due to complications in their story. However, when detectives expressed their disbelief, Kathy's narrative shifted again. Now, Kathy stated that she had picked up Jamie and taken her home, but Jamie was so exhausted that she collapsed on the sofa. Kathy claimed her contractions only started after this encounter. The significant changes in her story seemed implausible, but she attributed them to the stress of the emergency situation. Detectives aimed to determine the truth about how Kathy and Jamie met. Jamie's mother, Jeannie, stated that they had known each other for only a couple of months after connecting through social media. Jamie is pregnant with a baby. When asked about Kathy's relationship with Jamie, Kathy claimed she had known Jamie for only a few weeks and had been introduced through a mutual friend while seeking help with housing issues. At this point, inconsistencies regarding their acquaintance and its purpose emerged. Kathy couldn't even name this mutual friend, even though Jamie was 20 weeks pregnant, aligning with her due date, which raised further suspicion. Kathy was later informed that something significant might have occurred around 10:30 a.m., right after their meeting. Jamie was missing, and detectives informed the parents that they could not reach out to her. They encouraged Kathy to assist in the search. At this point, they were already skeptical about whether the baby truly belonged to Kathy. Kathy's husband, Shannon, arrived at the station. He was thrilled that his wife had finally given birth, but was confused about why she was being held and questioned. Shannon informed the police that Kathy had experienced miscarriages in the past, which had led her to struggle with depression. Despite the challenges, she remained hopeful about becoming pregnant again and starting a family. He feared that if their efforts failed, their relationship might end. For a woman desperate to become a mother, the thought of losing her husband could push her to desperate actions, even to the point of harming another woman. It was possible that Kathy had pretended to be pregnant to keep her husband with her. Additionally, her friend Shelley, who took her to the hospital during labor, might have played a role in this situation. Kathy frequently visited Shelley and shared stories about her pregnancy, but it was unclear whether Shelley supported Kathy's deception, suspected her, or had unwittingly assisted in a crime. Shelley told the detectives that she had never faced such accusations before. However, during the investigation, it became clear that she was involved in several aspects of the deception. For instance, after Kathy returned from a gynecologist appointment where she learned she was not pregnant, Shelley pretended to be a nurse. Kathy feared that this news could push her husband to leave her, so she asked Shelley to call him, posing as a nurse who confirmed her pregnancy. Shelley claimed she had no idea that Kathy was pretending to be pregnant or plotting anything deceitful. She believed everything was genuine and was genuinely happy for her friend. Kathy managed to convince Shelley, using various excuses, that pregnancy came with complications and that Shelley's support could help save her marriage. Up until the end, Shelley truly believed that Kathy would soon give birth. However, not everyone shares the same perspective as Shelley. When the police spoke to Kathy's other friends and her husband's relatives, it became clear that there had been a lot of discussion about Kathy's situation over the past 6 months. Many people suspected that she had been deceitful. For example, her mother-in-law often tried to reach out to her, hoping to find out the truth. She believes that Kathy is merely trying to deceive everyone, especially Shannon, to bind him to herself. The mother-in-law was very frustrated with Kathy's behavior and discussed it with her son, Shannon. For a short time, he listened to her concerns. A lot of suspicion arose from the continuous delays in the expected due date. The situation dragged on for so long that it started to seem unrealistic, as Kathy herself had no clear idea of when she would give birth. Witnesses noted that over the past few months, her belly has sometimes appeared smaller and then larger. By late 2011, the mother-in-law was convinced that Kathy was lying and was simply afraid of losing Shannon. She managed to persuade her son by highlighting that his wife was clearly deceiving him. He began to demand proof of the pregnancy, which led to even more elaborate deceptions. To maintain the ruse, Kathy stole an ultrasound photo during a visit. This image helped convince her husband, but it was not the only tactic she used. After stealing the ultrasound photo, Shannon is overjoyed about his wife's pregnancy. However, if the truth were revealed, their relationship would be over. His mother insisted that her son had been deceived. In the face of growing doubts, Shannon demanded more proof. His wife was well prepared and even managed to show him a video of their baby's heartbeat, which she had downloaded from the internet. Shannon was repeatedly misled. His mother was disappointed but unaware of the depths of the deception. She simply didn't know Kathy well enough. As the due date approached, Kathy needed more than just a friend acting as a nurse, a video, and a stolen ultrasound photo. After Jamie's disappearance, the photo was used to convince the police and medical staff that Kathy had given birth to the boy. As they contemplated the situation, a troubling image formed in their minds of how Kathy could have acquired the baby and why his mother, Jamie, was missing. Meanwhile, Kathy was already in an interrogation room at the local police station. Despite being stubborn and refusing to admit anything, she continued to provide confused and conflicting testimony, changing her story with each new detail the police revealed. There was no longer any doubt about her dishonesty, but they needed a confession. It was time to employ some tactics. They decided to leave her in the interrogation room alone for a while. This clever move aimed to see how she would respond and what attempts she would make to extricate herself from the situation. The plan worked, but not in the way they had anticipated. Kathy suddenly grabbed her mobile phone and called an unfamiliar number, pretending to talk to Jamie. When the detectives returned, she mentioned it, but she still couldn't provide any information about Jamie. A check on the phone number revealed that she hadn't actually called Jamie at all. The detectives quickly confirmed that there was no doubt that the boy Kathy had brought to the hospital was Jamie's child. DNA testing confirmed this connection. Although the detectives continued to act confidently, Kathy began to waver in her story. Unfortunately, she still refused to acknowledge what had happened to Jamie. The police informed Kathy that witnesses had seen Jamie get into her car alone that morning, and no one saw her come back, contradicting Kathy's claims. They tried to determine where Kathy had taken Jamie. Why was she holding the baby? Doctors noted that the baby's breathing issues and hypothermia were not accidental. He had been born less than an hour before arriving at the medical center, and his airways were still filled with fluid. Kathy seemed overwhelmed and unsure of how to help him, which caused the baby's condition to worsen. Once these facts were revealed, Kathy presented a new version of her story. Kathy revealed that about 9 months before the current incident, she had visited the hospital and learned from the doctor that she had suffered another miscarriage. After leaving the clinic, she encountered a woman named Ashley, who suggested that she could buy a child for $550 that was expected to be born to Jamie, but insisted they would need to wait until the boy was born. Kathy agreed right away and paid, hoping this would help save her marriage. Afterward, she pretended to be pregnant to maintain the deception while waiting for the birth. On the day of the incident, Kathy claimed she took the child from Jamie and left, asserting that she did not harm him. Kathy's account sounded unbelievable. How could Ashley plan such a transaction, and how did she know 9 months in advance that Jamie would have a baby, especially a boy? Furthermore, Kathy could not provide any contact information or even a description of Ashley, making it clear that she was lying. The detectives quickly noticed her inconsistencies. Eventually, she admitted that the story about purchasing a baby was untrue, but she continued to claim that she took the baby from Jamie's home early in the morning, insisting that Jamie simply vanished after handing over the baby. Kathy did not explain how she ended up with a stranger's child in her arms, although it was evident that the child was Jamie's son. Investigators were quickly able to uncover Kathy's identity and found unsettling details about her. Her stepfather, Imran, reported witnessing her shocking behavior on several occasions. He described her as cruel, manipulative, and unpredictable, believing she was capable of committing terrible acts for her own enjoyment and benefit. Imran mentioned that Kathy had once confessed to him her potential to commit murder. Therefore, he was not surprised to see her in police custody, convinced that she could commit any crime and was indifferent to the pain she caused others. It became clear that Kathy was already known to law enforcement. Detectives found a police report accusing her of stalking a pregnant teacher with whom she worked. Their interactions at school were frequent, and Kathy's behavior had become so troubling that it frightened the teacher, who detailed several disturbing incidents. One particularly alarming moment occurred when the teacher was alone in her office and noticed Kathy silently watching her from the aisle. Remarkably, during the time the teacher was pregnant, Kathy also claimed that she was expecting a baby. Later, the teacher experienced a miscarriage, and shortly after that, Kathy's alleged pregnancy also ended. If these events had unfolded differently, that teacher might have become a victim instead of Jamie. The detectives were determined to extract a confession from Kathy. They were not going to let her leave but needed solid evidence first. There were crucial details that Kathy was not aware of. Despite her persistence, the investigators believed that Jamie was no longer alive. When Kathy and her friend Shelley arrived at the hospital with the child, the placenta was discovered. This raised serious concerns about the childbirth. Normally, placentas remain inside the mother after delivery, leading to suspicions that Kathy had attempted an untrained surgical procedure, similar to a cesarean section. The police interviewed doctors and hospital staff. Experts indicated that if a mother's heart stops, there is typically a window of no more than 5 minutes to save the baby. Kathy was likely aware of this urgency, which may have caused her to act carelessly and make several mistakes that could have endangered her child's life. Detectives believed that Jamie had bled out and died shortly after the brutal procedure began. During the questioning, Kathy began to show signs of distress but did not admit to murder. She continued to weave stories under the detectives' pressure, avoiding direct questions, and suggested that she needed to be placed in a psychiatric unit, implying she was mentally unstable. In response, the police shifted their approach. Instead of pressuring her further, they tried to soothe her, suggesting that her actions might have been accidental. Their goal was to gather any information they could. Kathy was the last person to see Jamie alive, so all suspicion fell on her. The police continued their investigation due to concerns that she might evade capture. The police questioned those closest to Kathy, but no one could confirm her story. However, detectives eventually gathered important information revealing Kathy's true nature. Her own children shared troubling insights about her. Just 2 weeks before Kathy showed up at the hospital with a baby, she had visited a flea market with her kids and purchased a powerful stun gun. The seller warned that this model could incapacitate an adult with direct contact. While testing it, Kathy approached a large stranger at the market and waved the stun gun in front of him. When he remained unfazed, she pressed it against his leg, causing him to collapse. Pleased with her actions, Kathy laughed and walked away. Under pressure from detectives, Kathy began to disclose unsettling details of her plan. She initially wanted to simulate giving birth as realistically as possible, even considering placing the fetus and placenta inside herself. When this proved too complicated, she devised an alternative. Arriving at a friend's house, she sat in the back seat, holding the baby while using cut-out female organs to create the illusion of having just given birth. Regardless, she still refused to reveal Jamie's whereabouts. Her family members confirmed her violent tendencies. In fact, Kathy's own mother was so afraid of her that she took Kathy's children from her first marriage and raised them herself. Shannon's relatives were horrified by Kathy's erratic behavior and urged him to end their relationship. After receiving partial recognition of her situation, Kathy began to elaborate on her belief that she had multiple personalities. She insisted that it was not her, but an alter ego named Lindsay, who approached her friend with the baby. This persona was used to shift the blame for everything that happened to Jamie, although Kathy avoided providing specific details. She frequently mentioned that she belonged in a mental hospital instead of prison. Kathy claimed that when her personality switched, she experienced blackouts and couldn't remember anything. She described instances where she could get into a car, lose touch with reality, and wake up in a completely different part of the city without knowing how she got there. Detectives, however, suspected that Kathy was lying. They discovered that she had previously discussed plans to kidnap another child with her relatives and had even sought her children's assistance. When they refused, she dismissed it as a joke. Kathy's mother recounted how her daughter had repeatedly urged her to help commit murder, but she flatly refused. People who knew Kathy well denied her claims of having a split personality, stating that she had never exhibited such issues before. During the interrogation, Kathy's second personality appeared very self-assured, insisting that no charges could stick to her. Kathy continued to assert that Jamie was alive, despite the severity of Jamie's injuries, which made survival impossible. This bravado quickly faded when Kathy learned she was being accused of murder. After her arrest, Kathy finally agreed to cooperate with the authorities, even leading them to the location of Jamie's body. It was then that the true extent of the crime emerged. Kathy's friendship with Jamie was greatly exaggerated. In reality, Jamie had been another victim of Kathy, who had been stalking her. Kathy had lured Jamie into meetings with gifts and promises of a job. She brought the police to a wooded area where Jamie's body was found, badly mutilated and lifeless, with signs of being shocked by a stun gun on her neck. This was the same stun gun that Kathy had purchased at a flea market with her children just 2 weeks prior to the crime. When Jamie's body was discovered, it was revealed that she had died from multiple stab wounds and excessive blood loss. Kathy had immobilized her with an electric shock gun and then performed a cesarean section in the forest. This is why the baby was found covered in grass and dirt when Kathy brought him to her friend's house. Kathy admitted that she hadn't researched adequately to prepare for such a dangerous procedure. She only looked online once and thought that was sufficient, which was clearly inadequate for someone without any medical training. Kathy, who was 40 years old, was charged with first-degree murder, as well as kidnapping both an adult and a baby. In court, she cried and pleaded guilty to the charges of kidnapping and murder. The baby she had taken from Jamie survived and was later named Isaiah Allen Stice Reynolds, honoring his late mother with his second surname. He was placed with his father. Kathy sent letters to her children explaining what had happened, but those letters contained many lies. She was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Her children were placed in a foster home, and her husband remarried, finding a stable partner. In interviews, Kathy's children stated that on the day of the crime, their mother appeared completely normal and was not anxious about the act she was committing. During the trial, Kathy's stepfather expressed his sorrow, not primarily for his relationship with Kathy, but because he was relieved that she could no longer harm anyone. He also felt deep remorse over Jamie's death, regretting that he hadn't reported Kathy to the police after she confessed her intention to kill, believing that doing so might have saved Jamie's life. The case of Jamie Stice is a chilling story of despair, deceit, and unspeakable acts of brutality. Set in the peaceful small town of Morgantown, Kentucky, this tragedy reveals the dark side of the desire to become a mother, leading Kathy Coy down an unforgivable path of crime. Jamie Stice, a young pregnant woman filled with hopes for the future, became a victim of manipulation and horrifying violence, leaving her son, Isaiah Allen Stice Reynolds, motherless from the moment he was born. Kathy was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole and must pay for her sins. However, the pain she inflicted on Jamie's family and her own is irreparable. This case serves not only as a warning about the destructive power of deceit, but also raises questions about the boundary between love and obsession. Crime lovers, what do you think about this haunting ending? Leave your thoughts. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of April Holt. By the summer of 2023, April Holt, a mother of two and a positive thinking coach, had gained over 200,000 followers on TikTok. She building her online reputation on optimism and stories of overcoming adversity. She often encouraged her followers with the mantra, "Keep growing, keep manifesting, and you will succeed." Tragically, at the end of July, April was discovered unconscious in her bathroom and passed away a few days later. While the police classified it as either an accident or self-harm, April's mother, Jamie, held a different belief and began advocating for justice. In early July 2023, April celebrated her 29th birthday, reflecting on her accomplishments at such a young age. As an independent eyelash extension technician, she had left her previous job to start her own business and work for herself. On her birthday, she expressed gratitude, stating, "Happy 29th birthday to me. I am so grateful for the opportunity to live another year, for 10,585 days of life." Among her many achievements, April cherished her family the most, especially her children. She was a devoted and loving mother, sharing snippets of their family life on TikTok. Her videos emphasized positivity, spiritual growth. She inspired her followers by saying, "Sending good energy to everyone who sees this. I wish you a productive day. Be goal-oriented and grow." Occasionally, her videos were simply light-hearted and entertaining. Over the years, April shared personal experiences, including her time as a homeschooled child, which left her with painful memories of social isolation that she eventually overcame. She and her husband, Donovan Holt, who was 33 years old, openly discussed the highs and lows of their marriage. They started as friends, then became best friends, lovers, and ultimately husband and wife, welcoming their daughter and son. Their relationship faced several challenges, such as a period of separation, financial struggles, depression, and serious health issues. Despite these obstacles, April always focused on the positives, portraying their journey as one of resilience and triumph through love. On the morning of July 28, April called her mother to confirm plans for a trip to see a movie, but the plans changed, and she suggested they meet at church the following day. Later that day, however, her mother received a call from Donovan, who reported that his son had found April unconscious in the bathroom. She had a plastic bag tightly wrapped around her head. April's mother, Jamie, noticed that Donovan was behaving oddly. He seemed to lack the deep sorrow and confusion expected from someone who had just lost a spouse. He allowed April's mother to make all decisions regarding her treatment while doctors worked to save her life. Meanwhile, Donovan sat with his head in his hands, rocking back and forth. After 3 days of fighting for her life, April did not regain consciousness and was declared dead by doctors on July 31. An autopsy report released in November identified suffocation as the cause of death. However, the Nashville police found no evidence of foul play and classified her death as an accident. They informed Jamie that the case was closed, but Jamie refused to accept this conclusion. She vowed to continue investigating to uncover the truth. 2 weeks before her death, April had filed for divorce. This was not the first crisis in their marriage. The couple had previously faced difficulties and lived apart for several years. Although they had separated, they had not finalized their divorce. They maintained a friendly and warm image on social media, which may have been partly genuine, or perhaps they were caught in an unhealthy cycle, as they decided to give their relationship another chance after a long break. In their videos, they often spoke about the importance of forgiveness, open communication, and mutual support. However, the struggles in their marriage were never shared on their TikTok pages. After many years together, April was determined to leave Donovan this time and told her mother that she would not return to him. Donovan seemed to grasp the situation, as Jamie later discovered that a week before April's death, he pawned his wedding ring. There had been a fight between April and Donovan, but the specifics of the argument were unclear. Later, April's son told his grandmother about that tragic day, July 29. He recalled that April woke up as usual, had coffee, wrote in her journal, enjoyed the calm of the morning, played with him, kissed both him and his father, and then went into the bathroom. He heard the argument escalate and pressed his ear to the bathroom door, noticing their feet beneath it. He tried to make sense of their words but couldn't hear anything, so he ran back to his room. After a while, his father came to him, dressed him, fed him, and told him to come when they called for the ambulance. April was taken to the hospital, but she was no longer breathing. The doctors informed the family that there was no blood circulation in her brain and that her brain was not functioning. On July 31, 2023, April was declared dead, prompting Jamie to fight for justice and bring attention to the case from the Nashville Police and Prosecutor's Office. She launched her own campaign, reaching out to local news stations and celebrities while actively sharing updates on social media. This journey was challenging since the case had already been closed, making it difficult to attract media coverage. Despite major news outlets halting their reporting, Jamie persevered with her online campaign. Jamie obtained full access to the case and initiated her own investigation by filing a formal complaint with the Nashville Community Oversight Board. As a result, April's case was reviewed, and 4 months later, the Nashville police conducted a second investigation. Although this re-investigation did not alter the case classification or the official cause of April's death, it provided Jamie with valuable details to analyze. She meticulously studied the report day and night, searching for any clues. During this time, Jamie also focused on creating a stable and supportive environment for her grandchildren. Jamie openly discussed her pain and authored a book about her healing journey. Jamie became a strong advocate against domestic violence, highlighting how aggression can manifest in unexpected ways. After his wife's death, Donovan Holt moved to Texas and wanted his son to live with him. However, his son pleaded with his grandmother to allow him to stay, promising to do everything he could to remain by his grandmother's side. Jamie stressed that she does not influence her children's feelings and always aims to give them the freedom to choose where they want to be happy. She also wanted her grandchildren to stay together. Unfortunately, Jamie's relationship with her ex-son-in-law quickly deteriorated. In April 2024, she stopped posting about the case, explaining that she had been placed under a gag order. Despite this pause in her online advocacy, Jamie continued to seek justice for her daughter. Investigators initially stated that April had no visible injuries suggesting violence. However, Jamie observed significant bruises and marks on April's body while in the hospital, indicating otherwise. The autopsy report revealed marks on her neck, thighs, and ankles, along with a deep cut on the inner side of her thigh. Crucially, there was only one set of fingerprints found on the bag that was placed over April's head and on the tape that secured it. These fingerprints did not belong to April, they were identified as belonging to Donovan Holt. In September, Jamie confronted Donovan with the findings from her investigation. He admitted to committing the crime. Jamie wasn't shocked, she had known the truth. Following his confession, she took a recording of their conversation to the police, which led to the reopening of April's case. The previous conclusion was re-evaluated, and April's death was officially reclassified. On September 19, 2024, the police announced that Donovan Holt was arrested in San Antonio after confessing to a detective that he killed April Holt. A grand jury charged him with manslaughter, tampering with evidence, and perjury. He was moved from Texas to Nashville, where he was held on a $75,000 bond awaiting a hearing set for October 23. After discussions with the cold case investigation team in Nashville, all uncertainties regarding the case were clarified. Donovan Holt, 33, repeated to the police the same story he had told Jamie. During an argument, he choked April out of anger. To hide what he had done, he moved her to the shower, put a bag over her head, and secured it with tape. Then he went to make lunch for his son. It was only after his son finished eating that he asked their son to check on April and call for an ambulance. April's children are currently living with their grandmother, who reports that they are managing as best as they can, experiencing both difficult days and some slightly better ones. Jamie has expressed her gratitude to her social media followers for their support during this challenging time. Her struggle is far from over, as she is now working to upgrade the charges against Donovan from manslaughter to first-degree murder. With Donovan Holt awaiting trial, Jamie remains committed to seeking justice for her daughter. She insists that this case receives the attention it deserves until all facts and evidence are thoroughly examined, the crime against her daughter is fully understood. Her strength and relentless determination inspire those around her. Each day, more people are rallying to support Jamie, her grandchildren, including friends, acquaintances, and even strangers. On social media, in the news, and at public events, there is a growing conversation about the importance of speaking out and protecting loved ones. Jamie frequently shares her thoughts with her followers, emphasizing that her fight is not just for her daughter but for everyone who has suffered from cruelty and injustice. She hopes her story will resonate with other families who have experienced loss, highlight the importance of perseverance. April, Jamie believes, lives on in the hearts of her children and everyone she inspired with her positivity. Now, Jamie embodies this fight and shines as a light that cannot be dimmed. The day will come when Jamie, knowing that justice has prevailed, With deep sorrow for her child, Jamie will say, "You are not only my beloved daughter, you are a symbol of strength, resilience, and love. Your memory will continue to inspire others." Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of John Sweeney. John Sweeney was born on October 13, 1956. He grew up with an older brother and an older sister. People familiar with John's family described his father as a cruel and controlling man. From an early age, John was subjected to his father's strictness and was often the target of physical punishment. Psychologists later identified these harsh experiences as a major factor contributing to John's challenges as an adult. Despite their difficult living environment, John's family was close-knit and working class. His father instilled values of assertiveness and resilience in his sons. However, his methods were harsh, and he may have passed on his authoritarian attitude toward women to John, teaching him that women should always be submissive. Despite these hardships, John developed a strong passion for painting from an early age. At 15, he dreamed of attending art school, but his family did not support his aspirations. Instead, he studied carpentry and specialized in woodworking. This career path left John with a lingering sense of frustration, as he was unable to pursue his true ambitions and was forced to follow a different path in life. John had problems with the police from an early age. As a teenager, he displayed extremely violent tendencies, which led to a number of disturbing incidents. He frequently exhibited aggressive and violent behavior, often targeting his friends. One reported incident involved John getting into a dangerous fight while in high school at a nearby store where he was buying chips. Despite still being a minor, he picked up an axe and swung it aggressively. Witnesses said that, fortunately, no one was injured in the incident. The reckless teenager faced no serious consequences and was only given a warning by the police. By 1974, John had decided to marry. His wife, Anne Bramley, was his neighbor. Together, John and Anne had 2 children, a son and a daughter. Despite Anne's hopes that marriage and family life would calm him down, John remained ruthless, and nothing seemed to change his erratic nature. John's violent outbursts were especially severe when he was drunk. Anne revealed that he often harmed her pets to intimidate her and escalated conflicts by throwing bricks through windows, causing significant property damage. He repeatedly accused her of infidelity, even though she was faithful and gave him no reason to suspect her. Ironically, John himself had no qualms about pursuing romantic relationships with other women. According to family acquaintances, John treated his girlfriends as if they were his property. His first wife, Anne, experienced this firsthand. She described John Sweeney as sweet and charming until his mood changed. When this happened, he would focus on small issues, becoming aggressive and cruel. In these moments, he would easily explode and seem to invent reasons to justify his anger when none existed. After enduring this behavior for 5 years, Anne decided to file for divorce in 1979. However, like many manipulators, John tried everything to convince her to reconcile. Surprisingly, his efforts worked, and the couple remarried in 1981. During this time, John was able to control his behavior, leading Anne to believe that he had truly changed. Unfortunately, this did not last. Soon after they remarried, John's aggressive and uncontrollable behavior returned, and domestic violence once again became a regular occurrence. Before their relationship ended, they experienced another violent incident. One evening, John got drunk and attacked Anne. This event led her to make a firm decision to leave him and not attempt to mend the relationship. However, true to the behavior of a manipulator, John did not let go easily. Viewing his wife as his possession, John began stalking her. After Anne moved into a new house, an incident occurred while she was visiting a neighbor in the apartment next door. Through the wall, Anne heard suspicious noises coming from her apartment. She suspected it could either be John with malicious intentions or a burglar breaking in. Both possibilities seemed dangerous. Not wanting to take any chances, Anne called the police. When they arrived, the officers escorted her back to her apartment and searched the premises for any threats. Suddenly, John emerged from the closet, holding clothes in one hand and an axe and a knife in the other. He appeared startled to see the police and claimed he had planned to surprise his ex-wife. However, Anne believed he had brought the weapons with the intent to harm her, possibly even to kill her, as she had finally escaped his control. Unsurprisingly, the police did not believe John's story about the surprise and arrested him. However, he was later released without charges because he had not harmed anyone and was technically in his own apartment. The police only secured a verbal promise from him to stay away from Anne. After the divorce was finalized, Anne left with her children, moved away, and went into hiding to escape her dangerous ex-husband. Eventually, John gave up pursuing her. He decided it was time to change his life, leaving the city and embarking on a tour around Europe in hopes of forgetting his troubled past. He began searching for work abroad, believing he could find better opportunities and earn more money. Finding temporary jobs abroad was not difficult for John, but he never stayed in one place for long. He traveled to Germany and France before eventually settling in the Netherlands. Further investigations did not uncover any evidence of assaults on women during these trips. While abroad, John returned to his old habits, searching for a woman he could marry. However, his efforts were unsuccessful, and he was eventually forced to return to his homeland. Interestingly, upon his return, John rediscovered his passion for painting. Experts later analyzed his artwork and attributed its themes to his criminal nature. His paintings were gruesome, often violent and bloody, depicting brutal scenes. However, at the time, they were dismissed as mere works of art. Later, John made a living as a carpenter, taking on repair and construction jobs. He eventually settled in London, where he met Melissa Halstead, a model and photographer. She had hired him to do repairs on a film set. Melissa was an incredibly beautiful woman, and John seemed to take an immediate interest in her. Originally from Ohio, USA, Melissa had moved to another country in Europe, where she felt lonely and had few social connections. She was unaware of John's violent past. John quickly regained his charm, and after visiting her on set a few times, he suggested they meet. This marked the beginning of their romantic relationship. At first, Melissa described their relationship as warm and loving, reflecting John's manipulative behavior. Over time, they began living together. Less than a year later, John attacked her for the first time. Before this, he had repeatedly broken her self-esteem and cheated on her, leaving her feeling completely hopeless. Her career began to suffer, and her family back in Ohio recognized the toxicity of the relationship. Both her mother and sister urged Melissa to leave John as soon as possible. About a year after they met, Melissa's sister visited her in England. While staying at Melissa and John's apartment, she discovered banned substance and some disturbing artwork that John had created. She was shocked by what she saw. Before leaving, Melissa's sister begged her to end the relationship immediately. Despite this, Melissa chose to stay with John. In 1987, John committed his first violent attack on Melissa, which led to legal trouble. He was cautioned twice for his violent behavior. On one occasion, John threw a chair at Melissa, injuring both her legs. On another occasion, he punched her in the face. However, both times he only received verbal warnings and small fines. At the time, British authorities had a lenient attitude towards domestic violence. In the summer of 1988, John decided to move to Austria, and Melissa went with him. Initially, the move seemed to benefit their relationship. They reconnected and experienced a period without violence. During this time, things went well. They both made good money, and Melissa's modeling career began to take off again. She traveled frequently for work, and they could now afford to rent an apartment in central Vienna. However, their relationship soon fell apart. One evening, John's violent nature resurfaced, and he attacked Melissa with a hammer. She was taken to the hospital with a fractured skull. It seems that John harbored resentment towards her and became increasingly obsessed with his art. Psychologists later analyzed his artwork and concluded that it reflected his inner turmoil and violent worldview. Unfortunately, at the time these drawings appeared, no one paid much attention to John or recognized the warning signs. The haunting images clearly showed his desire to kill. While John was in prison, Melissa was recovering from the attack. Despite everything, she no longer resented John and even began to miss him. In February 1989, she appealed to the Austrian legal system, asking the court to pardon John. Under Austrian law, she had the right to do so. Her appeal was successful. Melissa withdrew her statement about the attack, and John was released after serving only 6 months. However, the police ordered John to leave Austria. Despite this, Melissa chose to follow him. They settled in Amsterdam together. In Amsterdam, John and Melissa rented an apartment in the city center, worked, and used a rental car. Their home was located near the train station. In November 1989, Melissa called her family. Since no one was home, she left a voicemail wishing her loved ones well, expressing her love, and saying that she hoped to see them again soon. After the call, she went on a business trip. In the following months, her family tried to contact her, but they were unable to reach her. At that time, cell phones were not available, making communication even more difficult. John also ignored all calls from Melissa's family. After a while, Melissa, exhausted by the constant conflicts and abuse from John, decided to end their relationship. She confided in her colleagues at work, telling them that if anything happened to her, it would be because of John. Soon after, she disappeared and was never seen alive again. On May 3, 1990, a passerby in Rotterdam noticed a suspicious bag floating in a canal. Upon inspection, the bag was found to contain body parts, although the head and hands were missing. The witness immediately alerted the police. The brutal nature of the crime became evident when the body was examined. What shocked the police most was that the victim's spine had been broken in half, and evidence suggested she had been subjected to prolonged torture designed to inflict extreme pain. After the murder, the perpetrator placed the body in a large black bag, which was then dumped in a canal. At the same time, Melissa's family grew increasingly worried, as they had not heard from her for months. A missing person report had been filed in Amsterdam, but since the Rotterdam police did not have access to it, they were unable to identify the victim. With no leads, the investigation was eventually closed. The unidentified remains were buried in a public cemetery in Rotterdam in an unmarked grave, and the police remained unaware of the victim's identity. John, the killer, escaped justice. By 1991, John had returned to London alone. He never told anyone about what had happened to Melissa. Her family suspected that John was involved in her disappearance, but there was no evidence to prove it. As a result, John continued his life without facing any consequences. At a local pub, John met Delia Balmer, a 40-year-old nurse. Their meeting was initially accidental, but John quickly used his charm to make her fall in love with him. Delia, feeling lonely, invited him to move into her house. John seized the opportunity, helping her with the housework and earning her trust. During this time, he worked as a carpenter, earning a good income by creating furniture and home furnishings. However, over time, John's true nature began to reveal itself. After nearly 2 years together, in December 1993, Delia realized the extent of John's temper and cruelty. She finally asked him to leave. Surprisingly, he did not argue and agreed to move out. However, he did not truly leave her life. John continued to frequent the same shops and bars as Delia, making sure they crossed paths often. Wherever she went, John seemed to appear, controlling and pursuing her relentlessly. He even attempted to re-enter her apartment. In May 1994, Delia went on a short trip around Europe with a friend. When she returned, John was furious that he had temporarily lost control of her. He tracked her down, tied her to the bed, and threatened her with a weapon, intensifying her fear. To further intimidate her, John told her a disturbing story about his previous girlfriend, Melissa. He confessed to killing Melissa, sitting with her body in his apartment for 3 days, and then disposing of her remains by dumping them in a canal in another city. Delia realized she was now trapped with a crazed killer. John demanded her complete obedience, warning her that if she did not comply, she would suffer the same fate as Melissa. Delia endured a week of abuse. During this time, she was repeatedly beaten, assaulted, and threatened with a weapon before finally being released in the summer of 1994. In July, Delia sought refuge at a shelter and reported the abuse to the police. She even showed them John Sweeney's disturbing drawings. However, the police dismissed her concerns, calling them a joke and accusing her of exaggeration. In early November, John left the apartment, and Delia took the opportunity to change the locks. When he returned on November 11th and discovered what she had done, he became furious. Despite locking the door, he managed to break in and attack Delia. The next day, Delia fled to the police station again. The officers escorted her back home, but John had disappeared. However, another attack occurred the following day. This time, Delia's neighbors and friends called the police. The officers arrived just in time, as John was inside the apartment with Delia. She ran out to meet the police, crying and terrified. During a search of the apartment, the police discovered a bag in the bathroom that John had brought with him. Inside the bag were rubber gloves, a mask, some rope, and surgical instruments, items that could be used by a murderer. Despite this alarming discovery, the police dismissed its significance. John was arrested and held for a week before being released on the condition that he return to his parents' home, 300 kilometers away from Delia. This distance was considered safe. But on December 22nd, John violated the terms of his bail by going to Delia's house in the evening. That night, Delia, feeling nervous, used a brick to block the basement door before going downstairs to put her bike away. She kept glancing around cautiously, afraid that John might be nearby. When she turned around, she saw John's familiar face staring at her. Suddenly, he pulled out an axe and swung it at her. She tried to defend herself with a knife, trying to cut his palm. Enraged, John grabbed the knife and attacked her. Delia screamed in pain and desperately used her bike as a shield against his repeated attacks. The commotion attracted the attention of neighbors. A man rushed to help, wielding a baseball bat and confronting John to protect Delia. John struck the neighbor several times before fleeing the scene. Delia was then taken to the hospital in critical condition, where she underwent several emergency operations that ultimately saved her life. The police began pursuing John Sweeney, who had fled. Despite their efforts, he evaded capture and escaped the UK. He remained in hiding for the next 6 years until he returned to the UK in 2000. To avoid detection, he used a false identity. John was highly skilled at altering his appearance, which made it easy for him to avoid detection. He quickly found work on construction sites and often used different fake names to remain unnoticed. After returning to his hometown, he met Paula Fields. Like John's other victims, Paula was lonely and vulnerable. Since they both came from the same area, John was able to establish a relationship with her quickly. Paula had spent most of her life on the streets. It was surprising that John managed to deceive her, as people like Paula, hardened by street life, were often very adept at reading others and recognizing manipulators or abusers. However, John Sweeney was such a skilled manipulator that he succeeded in fooling even someone like her. At first, their relationship seemed calm and romantic, but over time, John began to show signs of dissatisfaction. His frustration escalated into aggression and hostility. In December, John Sweeney committed a brutal crime. He killed Paula, and after handling the body, he placed the parts in separate bags. He disposed of the bags in the London Canal. On February 19, 2001, boys fishing in the canal discovered one of the bags containing Paula's body parts. They immediately contacted the police, who later recovered 5 more bags containing other parts of her remains. Advances in DNA technology helped identify the victim as Paula Fields and revealed a suspicious boyfriend. At the time, John was using an alias. However, further investigation by the police uncovered that her boyfriend's real name was John Sweeney. He was also linked to the murder of Melissa Halstead and was wanted for an attack on Delia Balmer. John became one of Britain's most wanted men. The police eventually tracked John down at a construction site in central London, where he was working. A specialist armed team was deployed to arrest him, as he was known to carry weapons. When apprehended, John did not resist, likely overwhelmed by the presence of heavily armed officers. A subsequent search of his flat uncovered over 300 gruesome works of art and poetry. Some of these artworks contained references to Paula and other victims. John Sweeney was later convicted of the attempted murder of Delia Balmer. On March 5, 2002, he was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after only 9 years. With good behavior, he could have been released even earlier. Delia was deeply unhappy with this outcome. As the police continued to investigate Paula Fields' death, they faced numerous challenges. It took another 6 years. In 2008, they were finally able to match DNA from an unidentified victim found in a Rotterdam canal to Melissa Halstead. This discovery linked John Sweeney to another murder. Delia's testimony, which included his confession, along with the presence of his DNA on Melissa's remains, played a key role in connecting him to this brutal crime. Melissa's murder had taken place more than 20 years earlier. Her family finally learned the truth and sought justice. Despite the evidentiary challenges, the police decided to use John's artwork as admissible evidence. Several of his drawings referenced Melissa's death long before her body was identified. One drawing even depicted a headstone bearing her name, details that only the killer could have known. Nearly 21 years after Melissa's death and 6 years after Paula's murder, the trial for these cases was held on April 4, 2011. John Sweeney was convicted of murder and sentenced to 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole. This ensures that John will spend the rest of his life in prison. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Sweppel family. Stephen Sweppel graduated from a local university in the 80s with a degree in business and planned to build his finances during his studies. He worked various jobs, including as a bartender and lifeguard, but he always remained modest. When Stephen met Cheryl, they got to know each other, and the lovers became inseparable. Thus began a relationship in which they complemented each other excellently. At university, she was very smart and loved working with children. Therefore, she became a social studies teacher, actively participating in everything from book and religious gatherings to various events with her beloved. Some time later, they got married. It seemed like a perfect union, destined to last forever. After several unsuccessful attempts to have children, Cheryl decided not to take any risks. As a result, they decided to adopt. Cheryl has adopted 4 children into her family, which was a thrilling experience for her, as she had always wanted to be a mother for those who needed it during their childhood. In the large house where they lived, Ethan, the eldest of all the adopted children, was born in 1998. They liked him very much because he was greatly interested in everything. He was showing energy that they appreciated for the sake of the family. Their 4th child, Eleanor, was born in 2005. She was the youngest of them all. Events brought a stable income, therefore, their family was always filled with warmth and harmony. This is not a classic story of career success. Cheryl left her school job after more than a decade, allowing her to spend more time with her children. She regularly started visiting her children's parents and grandparents, who lived a few kilometers away. They became local celebrities. A wealthy family adopting 4 children took on real parental roles. They wanted to give their growing generation as much as possible. In February 2008, everything turned upside down. The bank found itself in danger due to an incident involving the theft of over $500,000. Investigative organizations that were involved dismissed Stephen. But that was not the end. The investigation lasted longer than necessary to maintain its progress since there was no overwhelming evidence of his involvement. Ultimately, it was revealed that his position was affected by the economic crisis in 2007, related to problems in the mortgage market and over-indebtedness. Stephen sought to create a financial cushion that was plausible, as he was hard at work during that period. In a constant state of stress, a person is prone to making mistakes. New information reveals that throughout this time, they were indeed becoming the center of public attention, as the waste of such an amount appeared to be a source of sensational news regarding involvement in financial crime. Stephen lived under significant, constant pressure, especially from Cheryl, which irritated him. Totaling $559,040 over 7 years, was also reported. Stephen has pleaded not guilty, but has indicated to investigators that he did indeed transfer the money into a personal account. Like Cheryl, others did not understand that real problems had begun, which posed a significant issue for the family. More information on the 2008 financial crimes indicated that bail was set to remain free, scheduled for April 21st of the same year. In the event of a guilty plea for the serious crime, the minimum sentence would range from 3 to 5 years, after which a possibility might arise. A significant blow followed, not only to Stephen's reputation but also to their relationships in America. Sweppel family began to collapse, and they often struggled with the consequences. A true storm from the outside awaited them. However, they remained sociable and polite, despite the stress and mental disturbances that could affect future events. On Sunday morning, the Sweppel family attended Easter Mass at St. Mary's Catholic Church. Stephen and Cheryl's parents were also present at the Mass and later said they did not notice anything unusual about anyone's behavior. That evening, a family friend stopped by the Sweppels' home to check on Stephen. The friend saw one of the children, but saw nothing unusual. In fact, a terrible tragedy occurred. On March 23, 2008 morning at 6:31 a.m., Sweppel called 911 from his cell phone, asking for police to come to his home immediately and hanging up without giving his name. When police arrived at his home, they found Sweppel's wife, Cheryl, and their 4 adopted children, Ethan, 10, Seth, 9, Mira, 5, and Eleanor, 3, dead from multiple blunt force injuries to the upper body and head. Police recovered the alleged murder weapons, 2 baseball bats, at the scene. According to forensic experts, at the time of her death, Cheryl was around 30 years old and likely died around at 11:30 p.m. At the same time as Sweppel left a series of voice messages apologizing to former colleagues and relatives. Stephen Sweppel left a note for his father and brother at their law firm. In the note, he said his family was in heaven. According to Stephen, they were doomed to humiliation, and inevitably, he would end up in prison. According to the letter Stephen wrote, he gathered his 4 children into the family van parked in the garage and attempted to kill them then himself with carbon monoxide poisoning. When that didn't work, Stephen took the children back into the house and beat them to death. The 3 oldest children were found in their bedrooms. Eleanor, the youngest, was found downstairs in the playroom. Investigators soon uncovered that Stephen had murdered their entire family, revealing that reliable information was scarce. Cheryl was probably killed during the initial attempt to cover up the crime using carbon monoxide poisoning. Nevertheless, he lacked the courage to take his own life and refused to surrender. In the face of his wife's and children's horrific death, he can't separate death from life. Approximately at 6:36 a.m., unsuccessful attempts became more evident when Sweppel died in a tragic crash on Interstate 80 outside Iowa City. Witnesses said the driver was speeding and appeared to intentionally hit a concrete pillar. There were virtually no signs of slowing down at 100 kilometers per hour. Upon impact, the car overturned. They discovered a badly charred body, from which identification was initially impossible. The community reported that the threat was gone, not ignoring the risk that he may have orchestrated his death to evade justice. The charred remains were identified using dental records, to everyone's relief amidst the horrifying events now unfolding. It was hard to comprehend that they had been a respectable family, even if a bit of alcohol mixed with substances had been a fabrication that no one could believe or confirm. His loved ones often felt overwhelming sorrow. The event struck the entire community hard, as their lives had been brutally cut short. Stephen was not just a son-in-law to them, but a beloved son, and they sincerely mourned his death. On March 24th, their youngest child was to turn 3 years old. The term annihilator describes a phenomenon where a person kills their entire family. In this case, committing took his own life was akin to this situation. In 68% of cases involving family annihilators, they often kill to spare their loved ones from future suffering. Decent family men may seem like role models for family life, even if they begin to exhibit violent tendencies. The fact that Cheryl decided to return to work might have weighed heavily on him. Meanwhile, the mystery of the $500,000 stolen from the bank remains unsolved. Some believe everything is connected to the house that remained after settling the mortgage before going to court. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Cassidy Goodson. Cassidy Goodson's early years were spent in a loving family in a quiet area of the small town of Lakeland, Florida, USA, which has a population of about 100,000 people. Those who knew her described her as a girl with great potential who was outgoing and successful in softball. Both of her parents worked hard for the good of the family. Their first priority was always to provide for their children. Cassidy had a sister and a brother, with whom she had quite close relationships. In her teens, Cassidy had no problems with her parents or the law. She did not use illegal substances, did not smoke, was athletic, and excelled academically. Cassidy helped her mother with housework, and every Sunday, she went with her family to church. Everyone who knew she believed that she had a great future. She was eager to study and planned to pursue a career. However, in the spring of 2012, significant changes occurred in the life of the 14-year-old teenager. Her brother and sister noticed that Cassidy began to behave differently than usual. First of all, she gained weight. However, her mother believed that this could be associated with hormonal changes during adolescence. The girl's clothing preferences changed as well. It seemed that Cassidy was very self-conscious about what was happening, so she began to wear baggy clothes that hid her figure. Cassidy did not even change clothes with her classmates before physical education. Against this backdrop, some people quickly began to suspect that she was pregnant, and rumors about this started to circulate at school. She did not admit it to her sister or best friends. In fact, she found herself in a delicate situation. She was afraid of her family's reaction. She felt great anxiety and decided to hide her pregnancy from her parents, as well as from everyone around her. Gradually, her belly began to grow. Cassidy gained weight but continued to stubbornly wear the same pants to avoid detection. Around the house, she wrapped herself in a blanket. The once smiling and sociable schoolgirl now spent most of her time alone in her room, hardly communicating with anyone. She stopped going to church to avoid catching the eye of acquaintances. Cassidy's sister, as well as her mother, Teresa, noticed strange changes in her behavior. Teresa tried to discuss the possibility of pregnancy with her daughter. Cassidy immediately rejected such assumptions. Her mother insisted that she take a pregnancy test to eliminate any doubts, but deep down, she did not think that Cassidy could keep something like this a secret. Teresa bought several tests, and Cassidy agreed to take them. Teresa trusted her daughter, so she did not attend the test with her. This proved to be very convenient for Cassidy, as she easily managed to deceive everyone, proving that she was not pregnant. Teresa's trust became a fatal mistake. She talked to her daughter about this topic, but Cassidy insisted that she did not need lectures on contraception because she was not intimate active and did not date boys. Teresa believed in her once again, continuing to wash her daughter's clothes every week and monitor her menstrual cycle. Around the same time, even the father began to notice Cassidy's uncharacteristic behavior. One day, when he saw her walking around the house wrapped in a blanket, he also had doubts. He tried to talk to her, as did the rest of the family, but Cassidy rejected any questions or suspicions. Her brother and sister also suspected something was wrong, particularly after the rumors that had spread around the school. They doubted that Cassidy had taken the pregnancy test honestly and even discussed their alarming assumptions with other family members. All of this reached their grandparents, but they too failed to get through to Cassidy, who continued to tell them that she had simply gained weight due to the transition period and now had a lot of complexes because of it. They believed her. By the middle of the summer, her belly had become so large that it was impossible to hide it with baggy clothes. She walked around wrapped in a blanket almost all day, but continued to insist that she was not pregnant. Cassidy ignored her loved ones and could even be rude in her responses. Realizing that it was impossible to get through to their daughter, her parents simply calmed down and continued to lead their usual lives. Of course, it is impossible to hide something like this forever, as the due date was approaching, and it all could turn into a terrible tragedy. On September 19, 2012, Teresa entered the bathroom after Cassidy had spent a long time in the shower. She noticed blood on the toilet and on the floor next to it. Alarmed, Teresa immediately suspected something was wrong and went to her daughter's room. There, she found Cassidy, who seemed exhausted. She was pale and looked sickly, but still refused to explain what was happening. Cassidy tried to act as if everything was fine. However, after discovering the blood, her mother insisted on taking her to the medical center's emergency room, where the doctors examined her daughter for a possible miscarriage. Cassidy eventually confessed to the doctors. After the examination, it was futile to deny it, so she admitted that she had indeed had a miscarriage. According to Cassidy, while she was sitting on the toilet, the fetus unexpectedly fell out, and she didn't have time to process what was happening. Allegedly, Cassidy accidentally washed the fetus away and only realized the gravity of the situation afterward. She was scared and didn't tell her mother about it. Cassidy received the necessary medical assistance, her wounds were treated, and she was sent home to recover. When Cassidy and her mother returned home, both tried not to talk about what had happened. Teresa provided her daughter with comprehensive support. On September 22, 2012, Teresa noticed a suspicious and unpleasant smell in Cassidy's room. Since Cassidy was not there, Teresa decided to do some cleaning, thinking her daughter had merely forgotten to throw out some food. Of course, she was curious about the source of the unpleasant odor and wanted to eliminate it. While sorting through dirty laundry, it quickly became apparent that the same unpleasant smell emanated from it. Digging to the bottom, she found a box containing a plastic bag. When she opened it, she found the lifeless body of a baby. Horrified, Teresa went to the police, reporting what had transpired. That same evening, law enforcement officers arrived at the Goodson house and took them to the station for questioning. Cassidy, without much resistance, admitted that there had been no miscarriage. She had simply given birth and hidden the baby's body from everyone. According to Cassidy's confession, on that fateful day, her water broke, but she managed to conceal it by soaking her bed linens. She then went to the bathroom, where she pretended to take a shower to disguise her actions. She bit down on a towel to endure the pain and stifle her cries while giving birth on the toilet, using scissors to remove the baby from herself. Once it was over, she used another towel to clean the bathroom of blood. Exhausted, she felt the baby breathing. Terrified of being exposed, she decided to get rid of him. Cassidy strangled her child, hid his body in a plastic bag, which she placed in a shoebox and concealed in her room. Remarkably, Cassidy managed to perform all these actions quickly and without being noticed by the rest of her family, who were at home at the time. The detective wanted to classify the crime properly, so they were interested in the details. Initially, Cassidy was uncooperative but eventually agreed to tell them everything, reconstructing the events on camera. She was given a doll resembling Santa Claus and demonstrated her actions, indicating what she had done. After the baby was in her arms, he did not open his eyes, leading her to realize with horror that she had grabbed the newborn by the throat and squeezed it with all her might. She believed the baby would not survive. The murder occurred while the child was still connected to her by the umbilical cord. Afterward, she cut it, washed everything, and wrapped the baby's body in a plastic bag before hiding it in the laundry container. Cassidy had not discarded the box with the body simply because she did not know how to dispose of it correctly. Only an autopsy could confirm or refute her words. The forensic expert determined that the baby had been born healthy and full term, weighing 9.5 pounds. So, the claim that the baby was born prematurely was impossible to uphold. The baby could have survived if not for the barbaric actions of his mother. The autopsy confirmed that the child died due to suffocation. Additionally, he had multiple injuries, including a head injury from blunt force trauma, likely from a fall after birth. However, this injury could not have been fatal. The most alarming injuries were the lacerations on the small body inflicted by the scissors, which had been used as a surgical instrument to extract the child from her. The detectives were puzzled as to why she left the baby's body in her room, as it seemed Cassidy did not even intend to dispose of it. The unbearable smell in the room ultimately exposed her. Psychologists suggested that this could be a form of remorse. Perhaps Cassidy wanted to be caught to receive what she believed was deserved punishment. Interestingly, Cassidy continued to remain silent about the identity of the baby's father. Detectives speculated whether her pregnancy could have resulted from another crime, such as violence against a minor. But Cassidy only stated that she was trying to hide the pregnancy from her family out of fear that it would harm her relationships with her parents, whom she did not want to disappoint. She intended to give birth and get rid of the baby from the beginning, indicating that her actions were premeditated. After these revelations, Cassidy was arrested and taken to a correctional facility for juvenile offenders in the county. After assessing the nature of the crime, she was charged with premeditated murder. In addition, the question arose about bringing charges of child abuse under aggravating circumstances, also of the first degree. The police believed that her horrific act was enough to try the offender as an adult in order to seek a harsher sentence. They knew her as a smart girl who was never prone to violence. Her parents insisted she was simply too immature to properly evaluate her horrific actions. Under the Florida criminal justice system for adults, the maximum penalty for first-degree murder is life in prison without the possibility of parole or the death penalty. However, due to Cassidy's age, she could not be sentenced to death. Additionally, earlier that same year, a ruling was issued by the U.S. Supreme Court declaring mandatory life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for juvenile prisoners unconstitutional. Cassidy's lawyer faced a difficult fight, not only with the system but also with outraged local residents who learned all the details of the crime and demanded the harshest punishment. Cassidy's parents found a good lawyer who managed to negotiate a plea bargain for manslaughter. The hearings were very emotional. The Goodson family supported Cassidy, and everyone cried, realizing that this murder could ruin many lives. Teresa was brought in for questioning before the trial began. Teresa denied knowing about the pregnancy and detailed how she had initially suspected her daughter was pregnant, but had taken her word for it after the pregnancy tests. She believed that her daughter was simply gaining weight, which could easily be explained by hormonal changes during adolescence. She insisted that if she had known about her daughter's delicate situation, she would have never allowed what happened. She would have supported her daughter and helped Cassidy with childbirth. Later, none of Cassidy's relatives were held accountable. In a video shown to the jury, Cassidy has been reproduced how she killed her newborn son. She repeated that as soon as he was born, she hoped that he was not breathing, but after touching him, she realized that this was not the case, he was alive and breathing. Cassidy then squeezed the baby's neck with her hands, simply to make him stop breathing so that she would not have any problems. It took her about a minute to kill the boy. At the sentencing, the judge emphasized that Cassidy had never previously encountered problems with the law and that the probability of her posing a threat to society was considered minimal. In his opinion, Cassidy was simply immature for such a responsible step as motherhood. However, she was old enough to be punished for her cruel act. During the sentencing, the judge expressed hope that she would not be in the dock for another crime. The prosecutor and the lawyer agreed that Cassidy deserved a second chance, and it was decided to send her to a special program at the Hillsborough Academy for Girls. As she left the courtroom, Cassidy wiped away tears with the sleeve of her prison uniform. A few months later, Cassidy had to appear in court again for the commission to decide her future. She was sentenced to 1.5 years in prison, with the stipulation that if she again went down a slippery path of crime, she would not receive another chance for rehabilitation. After her release, she would be under close supervision and must follow the rules. Upon the slightest violation, Cassidy could end up behind bars again, as an adult. Special attention was paid to the investigation of the child's paternity. Detectives were able to establish that it was another minor who did not even know about the pregnancy. The relationship between Cassidy and the boy had ended before the pregnancy. The specific name of the young man was never revealed, so that no one else would be implicated in this high-profile case, which had caused wide public resonance and uproar. Protracted disputes and debates were just beginning, as this case raised the whole country on its feet. All local and national media seemed to want to comment on the incident. In particular, one of the studies detailed numerous incidents similar to the Cassidy-Goodson case, identifying a common pattern: girls are most afraid of hiding their pregnancies from their mothers. It is noteworthy that many of these crimes are committed by unmarried girls who fear being judged by their parents. However, not everyone agreed with this theory. Some studies conducted by other experts indicated that fathers tend to be stricter in such matters. In any case, this raised the sensitive issue of the Goodson family's involvement and the contribution they made to the boy's death. Cassidy maintained she was compelled to hide her situation from her relatives, fearing relationship deterioration. Even in the face of overwhelming evidence, she continued to insist on her version of events and openly lied. For many, this issue was particularly acute, especially after the events that unfolded. Experts in psychiatry had split into two camps. Some supported Cassidy and considered her family indirectly involved, while others solely blamed her for the crime. All of this sparked numerous debates, with research results being scrutinized and analyzed. For example, another expert study showed that 7 out of 9 girls who committed such crimes were their father's favorites or had grown up without a mother. Despite their lack of mental health issues in everyday life, they portrayed simplified roles that created a dangerous mix. This mix led to significant adjustments in their behavior and ultimately resulted in the murder of newborns. At the same time, these girls were often successful in their studies, participated in sports, and were popular in school, similar to Cassidy. This mix of roles caused a kind of guilt for being close to someone, which could distort their perception, making their own baby seem alien or harmful, something to be gotten rid of. Often, such teenagers hope of stillbirth, as it appears to be the easiest way to avoid responsibility. After that, they can dispose of the child without guilt and leave. All of this can be exacerbated by isolation from loved ones, as was observed in Cassidy's case. Refusing to discuss her problems with her family, she drove herself into a corner. Cassidy's actions sparked controversy, including debates about the topic of terminating pregnancies. It seemed that this would be an obvious solution to her problem. However, judging from the social media reactions and media coverage of the Cassidy Goodson story was used as an argument in favor of allowing abortions at such a young age. Many wondered why the burden of making such heavy decisions was entirely placed on an underage schoolgirl. Cassidy's parents' attempts to understand what was happening, they remained convinced that they had done absolutely nothing wrong. Questions arose about how one could not notice their daughter's growing belly and strange behavior. Why did they so easily and simplistically ignore the growth of her belly? Relatives noted that her behavior became increasingly uncharacteristic for her. Usually, close relatives notice such changes, but in her case, it seemed as if everyone was indifferent to her fate. They were surprised that it took finding blood in the bathroom for her mother to understand what was happening. Why, before this event, did no one take Cassidy to a medical center? Some people attempted to shift the blame for the crime from Cassidy to her parents, believing that she simply did not receive enough attention from her loved ones. This, too, could have concealed the real reason for her desire to keep the pregnancy secret. People were divided on these issues, with many disturbed by the fact that scissors were used. According to doctors, Cassidy used them to cut herself, severing the umbilical cord of a still, living child. To quickly pull out the baby, she used an ordinary office tool as a surgical instrument. Naturally, Cassidy experienced severe pain, but to cope with it, she clenched a piece of towel in her teeth. It was unclear what led to this mental or emotional state, whether it was her own horror or fear of what her parents might do. She was terrified of enduring any punishment just to prevent her mother and father from discovering what was happening. This raised reasonable concerns about what was really occurring within the walls of her home, leading detectives to conduct a thorough investigation. However, suspicions of cruel treatment from the parents' side could not be confirmed, as no bruises or signs of abuse were found on Cassidy's body. The other children in the family denied any physical abuse from their mother and father. After a year and a half in a correctional facility for girls, Cassidy was released. She successfully completed a rehabilitation program for juvenile offenders, and it was noted that she was not aggressive. The risk of reoffending was considered minimal. Cassidy desperately resisted reintegrating into society, having lost all her friends, received threats, and feared going outside. She often admitted that she felt hated and even persecuted. Cassidy realized she was living in hell, and it was unclear when this would end. She returned to her bedroom, which her parents had left untouched since her arrest. Everything remained in its usual place, even the lotion she had used at the age of 14. The hardest part was looking into the eyes of her loved ones, who wanted to help her. Despite the traumatic events and the heinous act she committed, Cassidy did not abandon her desire to become a mother. In 2017, she married and gave birth to her first daughter, followed by her second daughter, 2 years later. After the birth of her second girl, she posted on her social media that she longed to have a boy. These events were not just happy moments in her life, but also demonstrated Cassidy's determination to fight. She expressed online that people around her seemed to wish she wouldn't have children at all. When asked why, Cassidy responded with a smile, indicating that people could not forgive her for killing a baby and that she had many haters. Many wrote that they wanted Cassidy to remain behind bars for the rest of her life, unwilling to live next to a child killer. On her social media, Cassidy posted numerous photos portraying herself as a loving mother, a young woman trying to build her happiness and family. It seemed that with age, as she began to understand the full gravity of her crime, she struggled to forgive herself for the fact that her first child died. In fact, the boy did not even have a name. Cassidy didn't consider what to call him. Therefore, in the case of the murder of a newborn, he was simply referred to as Baby Goodson. All these years, Cassidy remained under close scrutiny from not only the authorities but also the public. Even after so long, people remained indignant about the fate of the boy strangled in the first minutes of life. In her posts, Cassidy often hinted at external pressure. In 2020, she made a post indicating that she was being subjected to constant harassment that she could no longer tolerate. Cassidy created a new account and began sharing her photos again. She studied to be a nurse at Madison College, It appears that the judge may have been mistaken in thinking that she had corrected her ways. Since 2021, she began to face legal troubles again and ended up in prison, just like her husband. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Sophie Toscan du Plantier. Sophie Bouniel was born on July 28, 1957, in Paris, France. She grew up in a renowned and wealthy family, with significant influence in the fashion and film industries. Sophie was artistic, talented, and assertive, which led her to a successful career as a film producer, making her a recognizable face and a symbol of success in the country. However, Sophie still prioritized her personal life and family happiness. In 1991, she married film producer Daniel Toscan du Plantier, and since then, she has been known as Sophie Toscan du Plantier. Their meeting was serendipitous, as both were entrenched in the film industry and matched each other's stature. They became symbols of luxury and wealth during that period, and their marriage attracted significant attention from the media. As both continued to thrive in their careers, they moved into a lavish mansion with Sophie's son from her first marriage. Sophie is a strong and energetic person, capable of resolutely defending her beliefs and continuously pursuing her dreams. Those close to her know that she is also a gentle, kind, and loving mother. The focus of her life was her son, Pierre-Louis Baudy. Furthermore, Sophie takes care of her image as a glamorous and fashionable woman, often attracting the attention of the media and reporters in the entertainment industry. As Sophie aged, she began to desire greater privacy, tranquility, and a family life away from the relentless scrutiny of admirers and strangers. In the early 90s, she started spending more time at her home in the rural area of Dunmanus West, near Cork, Ireland, a place she had enjoyed visiting as a child. Cork had become a popular retreat for affluent artists and writers drawn to its picturesque scenery. The hustle and bustle of Paris made her feel tired, so she decided to choose to live in this quiet and cozy place. In 1993, she purchased a cottage there. Unlike the villas she was accustomed to, this cottage posed some challenges, as it was in a remote area that was not always easy to access. However, for Sophie, the seclusion and peace it promised made it worth it. Even after she arrived, she faced issues with electricity and heating, which were often unreliable. Despite these difficulties, they did not significantly impact her ability to relax. Sophie was drawn to the local landscapes and the charm of the province because they helped her restore her emotional strength and inspired fond memories of her carefree childhood. After a long time away, she returned and was captivated by the beauty of nature, feeling as if she had fallen in love with it all over again. From then on, she chose to focus on the positives and disregard any inconveniences. Sophie typically spent her summers there but always returned to Paris, where she viewed this time as a period of spiritual and emotional renewal. Sophie usually goes there alone. The same thing happened in December 1996, when she was 39 years old, and she decided to visit Ireland to rejuvenate herself and read movie scripts before the new year. Arriving alone, she settled into her home in a quiet neighborhood. While she enjoyed her solitude, she wasn't a recluse. She interacted with her neighbors and childhood friends living nearby, was often seen around town. Sophie had established friendly relationships with many locals and always treated them as equals. Because of this, people didn't see her as just a woman from Bohemian Paris but rather as the familiar girl they remembered from their hometown. She engaged in pleasant conversations, deliberately steering clear of work and personal topics to avoid drawing attention and gossip. Before Christmas, a neighbor visited Sophie at her home. On December 23, 1996, around 10 a.m., she intended to chat about holiday plans and enjoy a cup of tea. However, instead of a friendly visit, she discovered a lifeless woman lying in the mud in front of the house. Alarmed, she immediately called the police to report a body near Sophie's residence. The condition of the body was so severe that she wasn't even sure it was Sophie. When the Irish police arrived, they encountered a gruesome scene. The woman's head was so badly damaged that she was unrecognizable, but she was confirmed to be Sophie Toscan du Plantier. At the time of her death, she was still wearing her nightgown and had on boots. The bedding in her bedroom was disheveled, suggesting that she had been awakened suddenly during the night or early morning and hurried outside, putting on her street shoes in the process. Nearby, authorities discovered a large concrete block covered in blood, which is believed to be the murder weapon. Bloody footprints led away from the scene towards the front gate, where the keys were still in the lock. Inside the house, 2 wine glasses were found in the dish drainer, leading detectives to speculate that the attack likely occurred outdoors, as there were no signs of a struggle indoors. Local police were not accustomed to dealing with such severe crimes in the area. The local precinct was small and lacked experienced investigators, so they had to wait for forensic experts from a larger city to arrive. These experts needed to thoroughly examine the crime scene in Sophie's body. They arrived just 1 day later, but during that time, Sophie's body remained at the outdoor scene. The weather was rainy and cold, and they could only cover her with plastic bags. Unfortunately, the damp conditions ruined some critical evidence. Once the investigation officially began, the police quickly noticed signs of a struggle on Sophie's hands. However, the passage of time made it difficult to evaluate these signs accurately. Most of the blood had been washed away by the rain, leaving investigators with very little evidence to work with. Forensic experts were engaged in reconstructing the incident that led to Sophie's death. It became clear that she died from blunt force trauma to the head. Some faint traces of blood were discovered on the gate and the entrance, but much of it had also been compromised by rain. Since Sophie was wearing boots and the blood was primarily found on the street side, investigators believed the attack likely began there. No signs of a struggle were found inside the house, and although 2 glasses of wine were found in the dish drainer, they could not be considered reliable evidence since they were already clean. It was uncertain when those glasses were used, as Sophie may have used them at different times by herself. Several DNA samples were collected from the crime scene, but in 1996, testing and profile comparison technology was very limited. This crucial evidence did not lead to any useful information, however, it was preserved in the archives. Detectives attempted to piece together the timeline of Sophie's activities since her arrival in Ireland. They discovered that she had arrived on December 21st. That same day, she was seen shopping at a grocery store, appearing relaxed while casually exploring the area. Sophie engaged in friendly conversations with several locals who were familiar with her. One store owner recalled that a man in a black coat and hat entered the store shortly after Sophie. Witnesses noted that this man appeared to be watching her and left as soon as she did, suggesting he might have been following her. It was obvious to those who were present that he showed no interest in shopping, as he didn't buy anything. No one else seemed to notice this suspicious individual on December 21st. On December 22nd, Sophie went for a walk along a path leading to a nearby castle perched on a rocky ledge. She took in the views from the observation deck before walking back to the city. She stopped by a local pub, where she ordered tea and chatted with some regular patrons. Eventually, Sophie returned to her home and did not go out again until late at night when she contacted her husband, Daniel, who was in Paris. This information helped investigators establish the timeline of the incident. Sophie's body was discovered at 10 a.m. the following morning, suggesting the attack occurred sometime between midnight and that time. Given the nature of the crime, investigators believed the killer was likely someone from Sophie's close circle, as is often the case in similar situations. The first suspect was Sophie's husband, Daniel. There were whispers that their marriage was struggling. As the police delved deeper into their family dynamics, they uncovered that the strain was due to Daniel's ongoing infidelity. Sophie had expressed her desire to end the relationship even before her trip to Ireland, viewing the getaway as a chance to relieve stress before the separation. Since both individuals were prominent and wealthy, the divorce would likely have been complex and highly publicized. Financial motivations can often lead to violent acts. However, Daniel was quickly cleared as a suspect when he claimed he was in France at the time of the murder, a claim corroborated by numerous witnesses, providing him with a solid alibi. The situation was further complicated by the fact that the murder occurred in a town with an insufficient police force, leaving them lacking the resources needed for a thorough investigation. This resulted in delays while they sifted through various theories and false claims. At this point, investigators considered the possibility that the murderer was familiar with both the victim, Sophie, and the local area, as the crime was committed without attracting attention. This explained the absence of outcry during the incident, even from neighborhood dogs, who would have recognized the perpetrator's scent but may not have reacted. Subsequently, detectives focused their attention on a man named Ian Kenneth Bailey. Ian was born in Manchester in 1957 and had a troubled past, as well as a troubled reputation. He started his career as a freelance journalist, owned a business, and held various jobs before moving to Ireland in 1991. At the time of the murder, Ian was living with his girlfriend and had experienced run-ins with local law enforcement. In 1991, Ian started a business but soon faced serious issues. He became involved in several troubling incidents after assaulting his business partner. Conflicts with authorities resulted in his conviction for assault later that year, and he spent some time in jail. Ian had a history with local police due to his temper and aggressive behavior, including previous domestic violence incidents that even led to his partner being hospitalized, although he was not jailed for those cases. Ian underwent a psychiatric evaluation, which revealed he had a narcissistic personality disorder. He was noted to be impulsive and cruel, with indications of various mental health issues. Experts described him as someone with very high self-esteem and a problem with alcohol, contributing to his unpredictable and violent outbursts. He claimed that his behavior was partly due to a difficult divorce that had occurred shortly before he moved to West Cork. There were additional reasons to consider him a suspect. His house was close to Sophie's, making it easy for him to approach her without being noticed. At that time, Ian was living with his girlfriend, Catherine Jules Thomas, who was also a local resident. Remarkably, on December 23rd, shortly after Sophie's body was discovered, they were among the first to arrive at the crime scene and possessed knowledge of many details about the crime. Catherine and Ian attempted to gather more information from the police to create a report. Ian claimed to be an independent journalist looking for a story, but he was denied access to the crime scene. The police noted that they were very insistent, even entering the house without permission. Upon checking his background, it became clear that he had a criminal history, raising doubts about his true identity as a reporter. Despite the police's objections, Ian managed to publish several negative articles. His aggressive pursuit of information only deepened the police's suspicions about him. The articles were filled with inappropriate details and speculation about Sophie's personal life, shocking her relatives with their lack of ethics and Ian's cynicism. Following the publication of these articles, a wave of public outrage ensued. Sophie's relatives publicly rejected Ian's claims by appearing on television. They believed that he was trying to tarnish Sophie's name for the sake of fame and profit. They agreed with law enforcement that Ian might be involved and regarded him with skepticism. When questioned by the police, Ian denied ever knowing Sophie. However, close friends of Sophie, who had known her since childhood, were convinced that Ian was connected to the crime. The media contributed to this belief by suggesting that Ian was involved in her death. Despite this, Ian maintained his innocence, citing his notes and a mysterious informant who allegedly provided him with crucial information, although he refused to reveal this person's identity. In Ian's writings, he not only focused on Sophie but also on a criminal within her circle of friends, who had hired a hitman. He suspected that this individual could be one of Sophie's ex-lovers or even her husband, who was in the process of divorcing her. While they were busy disputing these claims, a significant anonymous tip came in from a local resident. The witness reported seeing an unknown man near Sophie's house around 3 a.m. on December 23rd. The description of this man matched the appearance of a man that a local shop owner had seen chasing Sophie. Strangely, this anonymous witness provided a detailed and accurate description that matched Ian Kenneth Bailey's appearance exactly. A few days later, he was arrested and taken to the police station for questioning. Once there, he acted very nervously, created a scene, and made threats regarding the situation. Detectives quickly noticed suspicious scratches on his face and hands. When questioned about them, he claimed that he had been hurt by a Christmas tree that fell while he was cutting it down in the forest. Police were skeptical of Ian's explanation and took photos of the scratches, which only made him more agitated. Although his behavior seemed overly aggressive, he attributed it to his mental health issues. He denied knowing Sophie and insisted on his own theory, suggesting that one of her former partners might have hired someone to kill her. He loudly claimed that it was Daniel, not him, who should be investigated. Authorities believed that the criminal was a local who knew the area well, which explained how he could get to Sophie's house without leaving any evidence. Ian argued that the forensic team took too long to arrive at the crime scene, allowing rain to wash away any potential evidence, and insisted that being a local was irrelevant. He criticized the initial investigation as negligent and accused the police of attempting to pin the blame on him. Detectives interviewed Ian's friends, who reported seeing him at a local pub the night before the crime. Ian had no scratches on his face, making it improbable that he ventured into the forest at night to retrieve a Christmas tree after leaving the bar. Despite numerous objections, he was arrested on February 10, 1997, after new information emerged. Another key witness, Ian's ex-wife Jules Thomas, provided a statement. She was very concerned about potential charges from the police, which prompted her to speak up. She confirmed that she indeed met Sophie in the store on December 21, 1996. Ian learned about Sophie's arrival and went to find her to get a story. Jules also suggested that he might have followed Sophie to an observation deck on the 22nd, where she went to admire the castle. On that same day, when Ian returned, he acted very mysteriously and strangely, even commenting that something terrible might happen in the city that night. He never clarified what had made him anxious. Later that evening, Ian went out for a walk, but when he returned, he left again, only to come back an hour later. He assumed Jules was asleep, but she woke up several times throughout the night and did not find him at home. Finally, Ian confessed that he had gone to the nearby studio to work until 9 a.m. The inconsistencies in his statements and Jules's admissions led to his detention. However, within 12 hours, no solid evidence was found linking him to the murder. Under Irish law, if there is insufficient evidence to convict a suspect within 12 hours of arrest, the suspect must be released. As a result, he was released due to insufficient evidence. Despite being a prime suspect, law enforcement had no choice but to let him go. However, public suspicion towards him increased. Ian's behavior became increasingly erratic, which he attributed to mental health issues. The stress of being implicated as a possible murderer took a toll on his well-being, and he began experiencing hallucinations. He also tried to blame the police for defaming him, but his efforts were unsuccessful. The rumors he spread began to sound nonsensical. On January 27, 1998, they decided to arrest Ian again. He maintained his innocence and argued that the police had no evidence against him. Detectives pointed to the only DNA evidence found at the crime scene, which did not belong to Sophie. However, it was of poor quality due to contamination from prolonged exposure to the elements. This made it impossible to definitively link Ian to the murder, creating a significant hurdle for the investigation. Under Irish law, an individual can only be arrested twice without being charged for a crime. Ian maintained his innocence throughout the process. During his second arrest, authorities had just 12 hours to establish his involvement in the murder. He felt pressured to confess, which only fueled his anger. He sought to leverage his connections in journalism to discredit the local police, claiming that authorities were attempting to make him a scapegoat. Detectives believed Ian was simply aware of his legal rights and was stalling. Despite public suspicion of his guilt, he attributed his unusual interest in the case to his work as a journalist, stating that he was only pursuing a sensational story. This explained his presence while Sophie was alive. The police could not find any evidence against him, and he was released, leading to a standstill in the investigation. In 2003, Ian sued several news organizations for libel, as his connection to the murder had never been established. He sought to clear his name through legal action against the media. During the trial, multiple witnesses testified against him, claiming to have seen him on the day of Sophie's death. The most significant testimony came from an anonymous witness who reported seeing Ian near Sophie's house at night and accused him of lying. Jules Thomas, speaking for the prosecution, described Ian as rude and unstable, suggesting that he might be capable of violence. Nevertheless, the Irish authorities maintained that they lacked sufficient evidence to charge him. No conclusive evidence was found, and the DNA samples collected could not be fully analyzed, leaving officials constrained by the law. Sophie's family was deeply disappointed by the lack of progress in the investigation into her death. Relatives, including her husband, viewed the police's response as inadequate. In 2008, the family sought justice by appealing to the French court for an investigation but faced numerous obstacles. The key witness in the case later revealed that he had falsely accused journalist Ian out of fear of the police. After this revelation, Ian decided to take legal action against the Irish government for wrongful prosecution. His lawyer based their strategy on the witness's retraction of his statement. However, in 2019, a court in France began the trial without Ian's participation. Under French law, if a French citizen is killed abroad, the trial can take place in France. About 30 witnesses were summoned to testify. As a result of the proceedings, the court convicted Ian Kenneth Bailey of murder and sentenced him to 25 years in prison. However, the Irish Supreme Court refused to extradite him, arguing that the court's decision was flawed due to a lack of sufficient evidence. Consequently, Ian remained in Ireland, avoiding extradition and any legal consequences there. In 2022, a significant development occurred when the Irish and French judicial systems collaborated to investigate Sophie's murder. They reviewed all the case materials and re-examined the evidence, despite some being lost or damaged. There were suggestions that an accomplice of Daniel might have been involved, and Ian's account could have shed light on the truth. Unfortunately, Ian Kenneth Bailey passed away from cardiac arrest in January 2024 before he could learn the outcome of the investigation. The police searched his apartment, hoping to gather DNA samples for comparison with evidence collected during the original investigation in the 1990s. With advancements in DNA profiling and analysis, there was a renewed opportunity to uncover the truth about what happened. Nearly 30 years had passed since Sophie's death, and there was finally hope for answers. However, none had emerged yet. Angel Ormston was born in 1975 in Mentor-on-the-Lake, a quiet suburb of Ohio, USA. This area has about 7,000 residents, and everyone knows each other. Children from local families often get along and grow up together. Life here is very simple and similar. The local high school serves as the main place of learning for most young people in town. Angel is a friendly and cheerful girl. She particularly enjoys walking around the area with her friends and often drives around with loud music. Local teenagers often gathered at a large shopping mall in a nearby, bigger city, which featured restaurants, a movie theater, and various stores. It made sense that Angel would find a part-time job there. In the summer of 1992, she started working at a fast food restaurant as she prepared for her senior year of high school. This job not only allowed her to earn some pocket money but also helped her save up for college. Her daily routine was consistent. She worked in the mornings and spent time with friends afterward. On the evening of July 31, 1992, 17-year-old Angel planned to go to her restaurant to pick up her paycheck and do some shopping. She promised her mother, Jackie, she would be home before the mall closed. Initially, her mother was not concerned and went to bed, assuming she was out with friends. The next morning, she woke up to find Angel missing from her room. Despite this, she didn't worry too much because it was common for her daughter to stay over at friends' houses, especially on weekends and holidays, so she pushed her uneasy thoughts aside. In this close-knit community, crime was rare, and young people often visited each other without worry. However, Angel, a high school student, didn't always keep her mother informed, which led to concerns. Her mother didn't want to restrict Angel too much, allowing her daughter considerable freedom that matched her independent spirit. Angel's upbringing was relaxed. Her mother was adaptable and aimed to maintain a harmonious environment. Meanwhile, her father was often away as a long-distance truck driver. Despite the lack of strict rules or curfews in the Angel household, unsettling thoughts began to creep into Jackie's mind. Angel was missing all Saturday, and when her mother woke up on Sunday to find she still hadn't returned home, worries began to set in. She called families where Angel could stay, and her brother also went to the shopping center where she worked. Upon arriving at the parking lot, Angel's brother noticed her Honda Civic, which heightened his concern. He hoped to find Angel inside but instead found her purse, comb, and other personal items left on the driver's seat, indicating she might have vanished. He checked the burger joint where she worked but learned she hadn't shown up for a couple of days. Alarmed, he contacted Jackie, their mother, who hurried to the shopping center to retrieve Angel's car and uncover the truth while pushing aside her fears. Initially, she hoped it was just a series of coincidences. Angel often went out at night with her best friend, Stacy. That day, Stacy's family could not be reached, which gave Jackie some peace of mind. Nonetheless, anxiety grew as Jackie drove around the mall looking for Angel, but she found no trace of her daughter. Friends who did manage to contact her hadn't seen Angel since Friday. By 8 p.m., Jackie still couldn't reach Angel, deepening her worry. Jackie finally decided to report her daughter Angel as missing by going to the police. Although Angel was last seen on July 31st, Jackie did not visit the station until August 2nd. This delay raised suspicions among the police, but Jackie explained that she believed she needed to wait 48 hours before reporting someone missing. Jackie provided detailed information about Angel, including her life and relationships. Jackie asserted that, up until the very last moment, she was not worried that anything serious had happened to Angel. On the morning of Monday, August 2nd, Jackie managed to reach Stacy, who confirmed Jackie's fears. Stacy had spent the entire weekend at her sister's house and hadn't seen Angel. She was shocked to learn that her friend had been missing for over 2 days. Stacy tried to contact some mutual friends, but none had seen Angel. Following this, Jackie provided the police with new information, prompting them to initiate an active search for Angel. The police first examined Angel's car, which showed no signs of a struggle. The car was in normal condition, with no blood, signs of theft, or forced entry. The officers believed Angel may have left the car willingly. Given her age, they suggested she could have run away, but Jackie rejected this idea, citing their good relationship. Angel was not involved with banned substances and had always remained calm during her teenage years. Despite her independent nature, she was not the type to run away. In fact, she had been making future plans, including furthering her education at university. Detectives worked extensively to investigate Angel's disappearance. They suspected she might have been kidnapped from the car and collected many fingerprints at the scene. Although there were numerous prints, all belonged to family and close friends. Despite this, every individual had to be investigated to clear them as suspects since there were no other leads. The investigation began with Angel's father, a truck driver, but he was quickly ruled out because he had a verified alibi. He was in another state when his daughter went missing. Next, detectives looked into Angel's mother, Jackie. Her refusal to take a polygraph test raised significant suspicion and drew the attention of the investigators. They noted her delay in contacting the police and her decision to take Angel's car from the parking lot soon after learning about the disappearance, which further fueled suspicions. The police lacked the authority to compel her to take a polygraph test, and there was no direct evidence against her. As a result, the investigation continued with Jackie being the primary suspect. Jackie claimed that on the evening when Angel left home, she intended to go to a burger place. However, interviews with local staff revealed that Angel never arrived to pick up her paycheck that day. Investigators seized the opportunity to gather more information from Angel's colleagues. They quickly eliminated Jackie from the list of suspects due to Angel's good relationship with her family. However, they developed several other theories, including a suspicious connection to a former manager known for inappropriate behavior toward female employees. Investigators suspected that the former manager had been spying on female staff while they changed into their work uniforms. Later, he was fired for a harassment incident. Several female employees reported that this manager had touched them inappropriately. When the police investigated him, they discovered he had a criminal record for inappropriate behavior with minors, making him the main suspect. Other women also mentioned that he frequently focused on Angel, often looking for chances to be alone with her in the kitchen and making inappropriate comments. When this was discovered, the detectives were so focused on the case that they overlooked Jackie. The former manager was quickly located and interviewed, but he denied any involvement in Angel's disappearance. He said that she hasn't seen him since they worked together. He claimed that, on the day she went missing, he was far from his hometown and provided a timesheet showing that he was at another location of the fast food chain that day. Despite this evidence, detectives did not exclude him as a suspect and continued to question everyone at the restaurant, including both staff and management. Through their investigation, they uncovered a secret that Angel had kept from her family. She had been fired for consistently being late. While she was indeed heading to the restaurant to collect her final paycheck, this revelation did not provide any new leads regarding her disappearance. Gradually, all of Angel's co-workers were ruled out as suspects because they had alibis. Neither Angel's former manager nor her mother was considered a viable suspect in the case, making it difficult for the police to conduct their investigation. Communication with Angel's closest friends did not reveal any new information. Everyone was shocked at the idea that someone in her circle might wish her harm. She was gentle, trusting, and usually avoided conflict. However, her trusting nature made her vulnerable to someone who might manipulate her into a dangerous situation. After a long period without contact, fears grew that Angel had died. She hadn't reached out to anyone, appeared in public, or used any payment methods. Given these circumstances, the police decided to re-examine the people closest to her, as those responsible for such crimes are often found among acquaintances. The focus shifted to her best friend, Stacy. Although they had spoken to her briefly before, this time the interview lasted over 4 hours. From the start, Stacy expressed a strong willingness to help but firmly denied any involvement. She was cleared as a suspect when she provided a confirmed alibi. She had spent the entire weekend at her sister's house and they had been together the whole time, cooking side by side. The police are trying to ask Stacy if she knows about Angel's relationship with a man. Stacy revealed that Angel had recently become interested in a young man named Mark Sotka, a 19-year-old who had just graduated with honors from their high school. Stacy explained that Angel had been in love with Mark for a long time and even hoped to start a serious relationship with him. However, Angel was very private, especially about her relationships, and only Stacy knew about Mark, not even sharing it with her mother. During the questioning, Stacy reveals that Angel was aware of her pregnancy shortly before she disappeared. They had talked several times about the possibility of telling Mark about the baby, and Angel was optimistic that he would accept her and the child, viewing it as the start of their life together. Stacy was doubtful, but Angel was convinced she could build a family with Mark. The detectives decided to investigate Mark's background before confronting him. It appeared that Mark was not ready for fatherhood. Just before Angel went missing, he started college, which suggests he may have only considered Angel a short fling while planning to focus on his studies. They found no incriminating evidence against him, as he had a clean record and a solid reputation in school. Eventually, Mark was called to the police station for questioning. He was surprised to learn that he was considered a suspect in Angel's disappearance. He denied any involvement and refuted Stacy's claims about their relationship. When he learned that Angel might be pregnant, he laughed it off, dismissing it as a fabrication by his girlfriend. He admitted to having had a brief encounter with Angel at the beginning of summer but said they had not met again since then. Additionally, he had been in a relationship with another girl for 2 years. To support his claims, he needed to provide proof and a reliable alibi. Mark testified that he left work at 5 p.m. on July 31, 1992 to go to a shopping mall. He intended to buy a gift for his girlfriend and then meet friends at a pizzeria. The police began to investigate his account closely. His employment at a car dealership was verified through his timesheet, which matched his claimed working hours. Additionally, they found a receipt for the gift purchase. Several friends from work supported his story, confirming he was at the pizzeria until around 9 p.m. The only inconsistency was that some staff members at the places he visited that evening did not remember him. However, Mark willingly took a polygraph test, which showed no evidence of his involvement in any crime. As a result, he was cleared as a suspect. The investigation hit another dead end, prompting detectives to revisit earlier theories of escape or kidnapping. Discovering that Angel might have been pregnant reinforced these theories. Her family may have opposed her having a child at just 17, leading her to potentially run away to start a new life with the baby. Unfortunately, these possibilities did not bring them any closer to finding her. Frustrated by the lack of progress, Angel's mother decided to take action. She reached out to the community through local media in hopes of gathering information. Her appeal successfully raised awareness about Angel's disappearance, turning the incident into a well-known topic of discussion. Friends and concerned individuals joined in, distributing thousands of leaflets. Charities became involved, and a fund was established, raising $10,000 as a reward for anyone who could provide useful information for the investigation. In the following weeks, the police department received numerous requests for information, which opened several new leads for the investigation. Detectives conducted thorough checks, but these efforts did not yield any significant results. Frustrated, Angel's family made the decision to hire a private detective. When Angel's father returned from a trip, he was hopeful that it would help locate his daughter, unlike the ineffective efforts of the police. However, despite the detectives' hard work, no new information emerged. 3 months passed, and there were still no updates on Angel's case. By this time, her friends had almost lost hope, but her mother remained determined. Angel's mother, Jackie, even altered the message on their answering machine, leaving a note for her daughter in the hopes that she would eventually call. She refused to believe that anything bad had happened to Angel. Meanwhile, the entire city was critical of the police for their lack of progress, which led to increased pressure on law enforcement to revisit existing leads and suspects. Eventually, detectives began to focus on a man who was engaged to Angel's best friend. He was very interested in finding out what happened to her and was vocal in his criticism of the investigation. His name was Candle. Even though he showed a strong interest in Angel, he did not give any information to the detectives or the media. It was believed that he had attempted to start a relationship with Angel and was rejected, which might have led to her kidnapping or murder. On the day she went missing, he was working at a shoe store in the shopping mall where she was last seen. He had a confirmed alibi for that time, but after work, he could have committed a crime, especially since he was nearby. He allowed investigators to search his car, but nothing suspicious was found. The investigation had reached another dead end. On December 15, 1992, 4.5 months after Angel's disappearance, a local resident was out hunting with his dog. While walking through the forest, the dog became uneasy and led its owner away. This took them to a drainage ditch, where the hunter noticed something wrapped in a sheet and tied with a rope. Upon closer inspection, he saw a human hand protruding from the package. The man quickly contacted the police. When law enforcement arrived, they discovered a body in an advanced state of decomposition. Identification was possible only through dental records, which confirmed that it was 17-year-old Angel Ormston, who had been reported missing. On December 16, Angel's family was informed of her death. An autopsy showed she had suffered blunt force trauma to the head, which might not have been fatal. However, she had sustained 2 stab wounds to the chest, both delivered with significant force, impacting her heart. As a result, she bled out quickly and died. Investigating her death was complicated by decomposition, but fibers resembling those from a blue carpet were found at the scene. The police compiled a list of all homes associated with Angel, including those of neighbors, family, and friends, in search of a home that might have green carpeting. One key location of interest was the house belonging to Mark, who might have been the father of Angel's unborn child. At the time of the murder, the house was empty as it was for sale. Witnesses claimed they saw Mark enter the house with a girl who matched Angel's description. Although the house had been sold by then, the new owners allowed detectives to inspect it. Most rooms had been renovated, except for the basement. Upon entering the basement, the police found a blue carpet that matched the fibers collected from the scene. Additionally, a clothesline similar to the one used by the killer to move the body was discovered in the laundry room, matching the one found on Angel. The new owners reported that both the carpet and the clothesline had been left behind by the previous owners. These items were sent for forensic analysis, and tests confirmed that the microscopic fibers and the rope matched those used in the crime. Furthermore, a bloody fingerprint was discovered in the basement. 5 months after Angel disappeared, on December 31, 1992, 19-year-old Mark Sotka was arrested on suspicion of murder. During his arrest, he insisted that the police had no evidence against him and claimed he was not the person they were looking for. He immediately refused to cooperate with detectives, prompting forensic experts to conduct a detailed examination of his car. They discovered that although he had attempted to clean the interior, a few small drops of blood remained. During questioning, Mark eventually broke down due to the overwhelming evidence against him. He admitted to committing an act he described as stupid. When pressed for more details, he confessed to murdering Angel. Mark explains that he invited Angel to his house for intimate relations again, but things changed that night when she revealed that she was pregnant and that he was the father. This news triggered a violent outburst from him. He demanded that she get an abortion, but she refused. An argument ensued, during which Angel threatened to cause problems. In a fit of rage, Mark struck her several times in the face. Angel fell in the garage, and Mark, grabbing a knife, returned to the basement and stabbed her twice in the chest. Afterward, he calmly met with his friends at a pizzeria, chatting and laughing as if nothing had happened. Later that evening, he wrapped her body in a sheet, secured it with a clothesline, and transported it in the trunk of his car to a wooded area, where he left it in a ditch. Afterward, Mark returned home, covered up the evidence of the crime, and cleaned his car. After 5 months of investigation, he was arrested as the killer. During questioning, Mark confessed to first-degree murder and led authorities to the location where he disposed of the knife used in the crime. Despite thorough searches, the knife was never found. However, he had limited chances of proving his innocence. The motive for the attack stemmed from Angel's pregnancy, which disrupted his future plans. Mark had no intention of continuing his relationship with her and wanted to focus on someone else. In February 1993, to avoid the death penalty that was in place at the time, Mark officially admitted his guilt. Consequently, he was sentenced to life in prison but became eligible for parole after 30 years. Angel's family pointed out that Mark showed no remorse or compassion, which explained how he was able to deceive the polygraph test. Following his sentencing, he was taken to jail. After serving 20 years, Mark utilized an old Ohio law that allowed him to request a parole hearing after 2/3 of his minimum sentence. His family was informed, and Angel's relatives increased their efforts to prevent him from being released. Their efforts were successful, and he was denied parole in July 2023. After serving 30 years, Mark appeared before the parole board again, but this time, Angel's family opposed his release once again. As a result, he remains in prison. Angel's family expressed their relief to the media, calling it a significant victory for them. Her mother stated that their family would continue to fight to keep the killer incarcerated and would never forgive Mark, who has never expressed remorse or sought forgiveness for taking Angel's life and the life of her baby. It was here in 1985 that Captain Gary Eastburn lived with his wife Catherine and their 3 daughters, about 10 minutes from the base where he served. Shortly before the events in question, Captain Gary received a promotion, which required him to undergo training at officer school. Consequently, he had to leave his family for a while, attending officer school in Montgomery, Alabama, for about 10 weeks. This was an important step, as the family was planning to move to England, where Gary could serve in the Royal Air Force. Gary had a strong marriage that lasted for 10 years, and they kept in touch while separated. However, on Saturday, May 11, 1985, Gary tried to call his wife several times, but to no avail. He took advantage of several breaks to call but never received an answer. Finally, he reached out to one of his friends who remained on Fort Bragg and asked him to check on his wife. The man did so, but when he knocked on the door, no one answered. He couldn't wait forever, so he simply left Catherine a note, asking her to call her husband back as soon as she could. While shining a flashlight and walking around the house, the friend accidentally woke up a neighbor named Bob Seafelt. When Gary called Bob, he mentioned that he had no idea what was going on with Catherine, but everything seemed strange. After a fitful night's sleep, Bob woke up the next day, with troubling thoughts swirling in his mind. He noticed that a stack of newspapers had piled up near the neighbor's door and realized he had last seen Catherine leave for the store on Thursday. Bob went to the neighbor's door and knocked, but no one answered. Listening closely, it seemed to Bob that he could hear a child crying inside. Knowing the family well, he assumed it was the youngest daughter, who was about 2 years old at the time. Concerned about the situation, Bob called the police at 12:53 p.m. and asked them to check on the family. When the patrolman arrived at the scene, they began the standard procedure and shone his flashlight through the windows. They saw the baby in a crib, appearing pale and emaciated. Despite the protocol the officer needed to follow, they instinctively felt that something alarming had occurred. A patrolman immediately cut through the window screen and entered the house. Upon entering, he saw the baby girl, who was alive but in dire condition. Later, authorities reported that a few more hours in that house could have been fatal for her. After handing the baby over to his partner, the patrolman returned inside the house, checking the rooms with his weapon drawn. In the main bedroom, he discovered the lifeless body of 3-year-old Erin Eastburn. A pillow covered the child's face, and it was apparent that her throat had been cut, with her head nearly severed from her body. She lay on the floor next to her parents' bed, where Catherine also lay. A pillow covered Catherine's face as well. When the officer removed it, he saw that her throat was cut, she was naked and had suffered multiple stab wounds, indicating she had been abused. The scene was horrifying, with blood everywhere. The patrolman ran outside, trying to catch his breath, when he was reminded that the family had 3 children. They still needed to find one more child who might be alive and in danger. He returned to the house, found Kara, but there were no signs of life. The 5-year-old had died in the same manner as her mother and sister. When the investigation began, detectives quickly noticed that a similar crime had occurred 15 years earlier involving a military family, the MacDonald family, who were killed in a similar fashion. This crime was committed by a military man, a husband and father named Jeffrey. Numerous coincidences were found in the handwriting of the criminals and the circumstances of these 2 murders, suggesting that they could have been committed by the same person. However, at the time of the massacre of the Eastburn family, Jeffrey MacDonald was already behind bars and could not have been involved in this crime. Rumors spread quickly, leading many to believe that Jeffrey MacDonald could have had an accomplice or an imitator. Forensic experts found blood all over the house, as well as clear traces of cleaning in some places, indicated by X stains of blood. It was obvious that the criminal had tried to clean up but left even more traces. Using luminol, investigators could see that the marks had been erased on the bathroom door handles. Likely, the perpetrator used a towel that had been thrown into the laundry basket. The crime was believed to have been committed between 8 p.m. on May 9 and 3 a.m. on May 10, 1985. As it turns out, the last person to see the family alive was the nanny, Julie. The young girl had been babysitting the youngest daughter for several days before their bodies were found and was automatically placed on the suspect list. Julie mentioned prank calls that Catherine had complained about before she was killed. Some man had been calling several times a day for 3 months, but it didn't particularly bother Catherine. She didn't feel any danger from these calls and never went to the police. Julie remembered another person with whom Catherine had been in contact, a certain Angela who was going to take the dog from the Eastburns, Dixie. Due to plans to move, they decided to give it away because there was no one to leave it with. According to the nanny, Catherine had left an ad in the newspaper, and after that, she received a call from Angela. Julie was curious about what happened next and unexpectedly shifted the focus back to the bloody crime of 15 years ago. She was worried that it could have been committed by a copycat of Jeffrey MacDonald and wanted to know what the police thought about it. The detective had no trouble getting the suspicious nanny to talk. She willingly shared her long friendship with Dr. MacDonald, believing that he was innocent. They had known each other for a long time and even exchanged letters for several years while he was in prison. When she was asked about her interest in the case, she was unable to justify his behavior, and the detective did not pay much attention to her words. When she confirmed her alibi, he simply removed her from the list of suspects. The police continued to work in the Eastburn house even after midnight, despite the late hour. A young man named Patrick Cohn approached them and decided to tell them about what he saw on the night of Friday, May 10, 1985, at about 3:30 a.m. He noticed a tall, fair-skinned man in jeans, a knitted hat, and a black jacket leaving Eastburn House. The man was carrying a garbage bag slung over his shoulder, got into his white Chevrolet Chevette, and drove away. Patrick's statement was taken seriously, and he was brought to the police station to help create a composite sketch. When the portrait was finished, there was a striking resemblance to a serviceman named Timothy Hennis. He was a 27-year-old man who, along with his younger brother and sister, had been adopted by the Hennis family, a couple who took all three of their children from an orphanage. They grew up in a fairly well-off family in Minnesota, which provided them with a bright future. Shortly before these tragic events, Tim married Angela in secret before Christmas in 1984. That same year, Tim's brother died in a motorcycle accident, so they opted for a modest celebration instead of a lavish ceremony. A couple of years later, they had a daughter, Christina. Tim admitted that he was familiar with the victim, Catherine, but there was a good reason for it. They decided to get dog for company, leading to the contact with the woman from the ad. Tim denied any involvement in the crime but mentioned a curious coincidence. He had arranged to meet Catherine on Tuesday, May 7th, just 3 days before the crime, to look at Dixie. When Tim first met the police, everyone was amazed because he looked exactly like the composite sketch. The police asked him to sign a waiver of Miranda rights, to which he agreed, provided he could be assured that he was not a suspect, which turned out to be a ruse. Timothy provided fingerprints, hair samples, saliva, and blood. He confirmed that he had indeed met Catherine that Tuesday and had taken her dog, after which they had not seen each other again. Timothy denied any involvement in the crime and provided a detailed account. Witness Patrick was called to identify him, and he pointed to Timothy. Despite Timothy's insistence that he had not been in the area early in the morning of May 10th, suspicions against him grew stronger due to his lack of an alibi. The police did not yet have an arrest warrant, so Timothy was released. However, after 7 hours, he was detained, officially charged with triple first-degree murder and abuse. Naturally, Timothy was not the only suspect. As is often the case, the police first considered the widower Gary Eastburn. When Gary was informed of the events, he remained surprisingly calm and simply asked if at least one family member had survived. When he learned that only the youngest daughter had survived, he broke down in tears. Gary had grown up as an ordinary young man. At the age of 12, his parents divorced, and his relationship with his stepfather did not work out. Despite this, he had a relatively calm childhood. He met Catherine in 1972, approximately 13 years before the tragedy. At that time, he was around 25 years old, having been born in 1947. Their daughter Kara was born in 1980. Gary decided to become a military man to support his growing family. When he finally returned to the city after the tragedy, he wanted to reach his surviving child. Instead, he was immediately taken to the police station for questioning, where they held him until about 2 a.m. Gary provided a reliable alibi. His blood and hair samples were taken before he was released. He was able to see his daughter late at night. She was in serious condition and did not even recognize him. Afterward, he went into their home to see what was missing. Gary had no idea who could have attacked his wife and children. They had no obvious enemies, but he remembered several prank calls that had started a few months before he left for training at officer school. The caller addressed Catherine by her first and last name, but no one paid attention to it at the time. Everyone thought it was just teenagers playing around, so no one raised the alarm. Now, in light of the tragic events, the calls seemed more suspicious. However, they could not be tracked due to a lack of technology at that time. After inspecting the house, the police reported that a metal safe containing important family documents was missing, along with $300 in cash that had been set aside for Christmas and Catherine's wallet with bank cards. This provided valuable clues. The ATM was identified, and it turned out that a transaction was made using Catherine's card. It was used shortly after the murders, including a transaction on May 11th. Detectives found a witness who provided a description of the man who came at night to withdraw cash, and this description exactly matched Timothy Hennis. In addition, she saw a white car belonging to Timothy. At this stage, the whole city already knew about the crime and the main suspect. Other witnesses also came forward. Timothy's neighbor saw him burning something in his backyard the day after the murder, likely getting rid of evidence. A local dry cleaner reported that Timothy had brought them a black jacket right after the crime. According to the description, it resembled the clothing that the witness Patrick had described. Timothy was questioned when his ex-wife said he had come to visit her that fateful night. His landlord mentioned that Timothy had not paid the rent for the house, which had accumulated over $300 in debt, but as soon as the eviction notice was served on May 10th, Timothy paid it off almost immediately. But where did he get the money so quickly? It seemed strange that the same amount disappeared from the home of the murdered family. Indirect evidence against Timothy was accumulating, but there was no irrefutable proof. By Christmas, it was decided to allow the suspect to post bail with the help of his relatives, and he managed to raise the funds. The reason for this leniency was the results of laboratory tests indicating that his biological materials did not match any evidence. Specifically, his blood type did not match. However, this could be attributed to the low accuracy of the testing methods used at that time. The prosecutor's office decided to turn to the only survivor of that bloody night, 2-year-old Jana. After the tragedy, the girl had not been able to come to her senses for a long time, but by February of the following year, she finally spoke. Gary was categorically against involving his daughter in the investigation, fearing that she would suffer further psychological trauma, but under pressure from the police, he ultimately agreed in order to seek justice for the victims. A special psychologist from North Carolina held 5 recorded conversations with Jana. During this time, she experienced several panic attacks and was still unable to recognize Timothy's photo. Based on the results of these sessions, it remained unclear whether there was one perpetrator or multiple criminals. Thus, the prosecutor's office decided to refuse to use Jana's testimony in the case. The trial was set for April 27, 1986. Timothy rejected the plea bargain offered by the prosecution. His lawyer wanted to change the location of the hearing but ultimately decided it would not make much difference. Instead, the defense focused on refuting the numerous circumstantial evidence on which the prosecution's case was based. The lawyer argued that the witness Patrick was lying when he claimed to have seen Timothy, described his appearance and car in such detail, especially since it had happened at night. He questioned how Patrick could have seen all of this in the dark. The lawyer discovered that the witness was going through a difficult time and had been pressured by the police. During numerous meetings with Timothy's lawyer, Patrick admitted that he might have made a mistake during the identification. The more he talked with the defense, the less certain he became about having seen Timothy on the street that night. On the day of the trial, the lawyer tried to get Patrick to admit that he had participated in the identification under pressure from detectives, but he did not. The defense discovered something even more significant. During the investigation, the police had gained access to the Fort Bragg duty log, which showed that Tim was on duty at the time of the crime, but this page mysteriously disappeared during the investigation. The lawyer believed that the detectives had intentionally torn out this page. Now, the defense attorney pressed this fact, interpreting the police's behavior as an attempt to convict an innocent person by destroying evidence of his innocence. Timothy's family was away at the time of the crime. The prosecution proposed a theory that Timothy had taken advantage of his wife's absence to start a romantic relationship with Catherine and visited her home on that fateful evening. However, Catherine rejected his advances, which angered him, leading him to kill her and her 2 children. The discussion then turned to the bank card. It was determined that the payment method had been used at 2:52 a.m. on May 11 when the defendant was on duty. Although this could not be confirmed, there was reasonable doubt that Timothy could have used it. Even though there was still no confirmed alibi for the night of the crime, the lawyers systematically managed to destroy the majority of the prosecution's arguments and raised doubts among the jury in order to convince them of Timothy's innocence. The prosecution presented frightening photographs from the crime scene and autopsies of the victims, about 100 photographs, which were included in a slideshow that lasted more than an hour. The tension in the courtroom was palpable. Despite the defense attorney's desperate attempts to convince the jury of the defendant's innocence, on July 4, 1986, Timothy Hennis was found guilty on all counts. The defense attorney believed that the main reason for this verdict was their failure to insist on a change of venue. He felt that his job was not finished since Timothy was sentenced to death, so he focused on saving his client's life. Interestingly, just a few days after starting his sentence, Timothy received a postcard in prison signed by Mr. X. In it, a mysterious stranger claimed responsibility for killing Timothy's family and apologized for Timothy serving time for his crimes. Mr. X admitted that he had left North Carolina and had no intention of returning. Timothy informed his lawyer about the postcard. Later, it was used at the retrial, but at the time of its receipt, the prosecutor dismissed it as a forgery. During this period, Timothy's parents rallied around him. Despite their divorce, they made every effort to save enough money to pay for his defense. The Supreme Court of North Carolina was approached, and the lawyers cited bias, arguing that the jury had been provoked by the photographs. The defense insisted that nearly 100 gruesome images from the massacre were guaranteed to elicit a negative reaction from the jury. Despite the lack of irrefutable evidence against Timothy, it came to light that several detectives who led the case were nearing retirement. The lawyers believed they simply did not want to leave behind an unsolved crime of such magnitude and were seeking a scapegoat, which they considered Timothy Hennis to be. The defense successfully secured a change of venue to Wilmington, a coastal town located 100 kilometers from Fayetteville. The new prosecutor agreed to this change without hesitation, confident in the prosecution's tactics, but the defense was well prepared and closed all loopholes except for one. There was still no reliable confirmation of the defendant's whereabouts on the night of the murder. The defense aimed to discredit the prosecution's main witness, Patrick, in court. During the interval between the first and second trials, Patrick had committed several minor offenses, including driving without a license. When stopped by the authorities, he advised them to contact the district attorney since he was a witness in the Timothy case. The lawyers believed this statement practically indicated that he had received a bribe from the very beginning. More thorough examinations of the collected evidence refuted the case against Timothy. The shoe prints found inside the house were 3 sizes smaller than his. There was blood on a towel in the bathroom, as well as other traces that did not match his profile. The defense presented a black jacket to the judge that was tested for bloodstains. Even the hair found on Catherine's body did not belong to Timothy. In this context, the numerous circumstantial pieces of evidence that the prosecutor's office had used in the first trial appeared less convincing during the retrial. The prosecution attempted to challenge all the defense's arguments with their own versions, but none of this was compelling in light of the thorough preparation from the defense. 2 days later, the jury found Timothy not guilty on all counts. It is noteworthy that during this hearing, only a few photographs from the crime scene were shown, as opposed to the 100 images in a lengthy slideshow during the first trial. 3 years later, Timothy was released from death row. He re-enlisted in military service, served in Saudi Arabia and Somalia, and then returned to the United States. In 1998, Timothy and his family settled in Fort Lewis, Washington. In 2004, he retired from the Army and took a job at a waste processing plant. He also became a Boy Scout leader. Meanwhile, widower Gary followed his plan and moved with his surviving daughter to the UK. In 2009, he served in the Royal Air Force, after which he married a nurse. In 2009, after leaving the Air Force, Gary returned to the U.S. and settled in Washington. Subsequently, legislation was amended to prohibit retrials for individuals already convicted twice of the same crime. Disagreements arose on the basis that during the first trial, Timothy was in military service, thereby placing him under a different jurisdiction. This left the state in limbo, although it did not exclude the possibility that he could be brought to retrial. Despite such situations being rare in the state's judicial practice, they did not return to the case for almost 20 years. It seemed that life was improving, but the case of the triple murder remained unsolved. Finally, in 2006, a detective investigating particularly brutal murders decided to test the DNA materials collected from the body of Catherine. However, the only information the laboratory could provide at that time was that the collected samples belonged to a light-skinned individual. By 2010, the laboratory in North Carolina became embroiled in a significant scandal. It turned out that over the past decade and a half, the state crime lab systematically concealed or manipulated evidence to ensure convictions. This was revealed in at least 230 cases, 10 of which resulted in the wrongful conviction of innocent people sentenced to death. 3 of them even received lethal injections and were deprived of life. The DNA in the Eastburn case was retested, and the examination showed that the materials from the crime scene in the archive matched those of Timothy Hennis. In light of such convincing evidence, his trial was reopened for the third time. Timothy hired the best military lawyer named Frank Spinner to lead his defense team. The lawyer attempted to tarnish the reputation of the victim, Catherine, by alleging that she was promiscuous with Timothy, hinting that that was why his DNA might have turned up in her home. Timothy argued that she was unfaithful to him and that the real killer was an individual named Mr. X, who had written a postcard to him while he was in prison. This attempt had the opposite effect. The prosecutor's office pointed out the obvious lie, as Timothy had previously denied any intimate contact with Catherine. He later claimed that he initially did not disclose the affair due to fear of exposure. Despite a fierce struggle for Timothy's freedom, the chosen tactics now appeared unconvincing. On April 15, 2010, a jury recommended that Hennis be sentenced to death. In addition, he was demoted to Private E1, stripped of all pay and allowances, dishonorably discharged from the United States Army. Hennis was incarcerated at the United States Disciplinary Barracks at Fort Leavenworth in Kansas, where he remains to this day. All his subsequent appeals were rejected. Under U.S. legislation, without the president's approval, they cannot execute him. Therefore, the likelihood that he will be deprived of life is low. The U.S. military has not executed anyone from its ranks since 1961. Interestingly, in 1985, when the murders of the Eastburn family occurred, a 20-year-old woman from Rochester, Minnesota, where Tim had lived for a long time, contacted the police to share her story. Upon hearing about the triple murder in North Carolina, she revealed that at the age of 11, she had been abused by Timothy Hennis. Unfortunately, due to a data error, she was not permitted to testify. Had she been allowed to do so, the outcome of the second trial, when he was acquitted, could have been entirely different, and he would most likely have been found guilty again. Even now, this trial raises more questions than answers. The story of the nanny, who cared for the Eastburn children, also raises many questions. Julie was addicted, and there were witnesses who heard her confess to the crime. Additionally, her unhealthy obsession with Jeffrey MacDonald, with whom she even corresponded, raises further doubts. Some supporters of Timothy believe that it was Julie who could have imitated her idol and killed the family with whom she worked. Oscar Pistorius, a famous Paralympic champion, is originally from South Africa and lives in the city of Pretoria. He was born on November 22, 1986, with a serious developmental disorder that caused his legs to be thin and underdeveloped. Oscar's family went through many hardships, and his parents often argued. He had a younger sister, and after her birth, his parents decided to divorce. However, his father continued to support the family financially. Oscar's mother taught him that one should not give up in difficult situations, but should fight instead. Growing up, Oscar was an active child. When he was just 1 year old, he had to have his legs amputated below the knee because they were not growing. At 17 months old, he was fitted with his first prosthetic legs. As Oscar grew older, he became stronger and decided to pursue a career in sports. He initially played rugby and water polo, but after injuring his kneecap as a teenager, he was advised to take up athletics for rehabilitation. Over time, his passion for athletics developed, particularly for short-distance running. At the age of 15, Oscar lost his mother, who had been his close friend and supporter in all his endeavors. This loss deeply affected him, leading to emotional distress, but he remained determined to continue his training and pursue his goals. His hard work paid off when, at 17, he won a bronze medal in the 100-meter race and a gold medal in the 200-meter race at the Athens Paralympic Games in 2004. In 2007, he showcased his talent again by finishing second in the 400-meter race. Despite his young age, Oscar has achieved incredible success that many can only dream of. He has attracted significant media attention and built a large fan base, earning him the nickname "the man who runs on blades," due to his special prosthetic legs and impressive speed. By 2012, Oscar had reached the peak of his athletic career. During this time, he met Riva Steenkamp, a 29-year-old South African model and law graduate, through a mutual friend named Justin. They felt an instant connection, often described as love at first sight, and began dating. They officially got engaged in 2013. Riva grew up in Cape Town with her father, Barry, her mother, June Steenkamp, and two half-brothers. The family later moved to Port Elizabeth, where she pursued a law degree at university. Riva was not only intelligent, graduating with honors, but she was also very attractive. She started modeling at the age of 14, initially as a hobby, but soon began to take it more seriously. By the age of 29, she had become a well-known face in fashion magazines, frequently appearing on television and participating in various shows. However, her life wasn't without challenges. At 20, she was involved in a serious accident while riding. Riva's father, Barry, was a renowned horse trainer and breaker. He introduced his daughter to riding at a young age, starting her off with a pony. When Riva was 20, she suffered a serious lower back injury after falling from a horse, which required her to nearly relearn how to walk. By 2012, she had fully recovered and had achieved both wealth and fame, similar to Oscar. Their first meeting was unplanned, but they encountered each other again at a major award event where Oscar was being honored. Photographers captured them together, and the media quickly labeled them a stunning couple, taking numerous photos and asking questions. Both Riva and Oscar were talented in their respective fields and appeared to be a perfect match. Eventually, they developed feelings for each other, began dating, and got engaged. On Valentine's Day, February 14, 2013, Oscar and Riva celebrated 3 months of their relationship with a dinner at Oscar's home. Oscar lived in a mansion located within a gated community, where all the houses were similar to his and were surrounded by tall fences for security. The residents were very wealthy and took extensive measures to protect themselves, such as using CCTV cameras, combination locks, and other security systems. The cameras at the entrance captured the arrival of Oscar and Riva. They enjoyed a romantic candlelight dinner and stayed up late into the night. Later, someone told the police that they had heard the sound of weapons exploding in Oscar's villa. Emergency services quickly arrived at the scene where a crowd had gathered to understand what had happened. Paramedics entered the house and found a girl lying on the bathroom floor, covered in blood. After examining her, they realized she was beyond help. She was dead. Oscar was found in the house, in a state of shock. The police tried to calm him, but he was so distressed that he couldn't comprehend what they were saying. He cried and screamed, eventually managing to explain that he had killed her because he thought she was a burglar. According to Oscar, after dinner, he and Riva went to bed. Early the next morning, he went out onto the balcony to get some fresh air, predicting that it would be a hot day. Suddenly, he heard a noise coming from the bathroom. Although he knew Riva was in bed with him, he didn't check on her. Believing that someone had broken into the house, he took a weapon from the nightstand where he always kept it. In his youth, he had been attacked by an unstable person and had received threats from envious individuals, which is why he took security seriously and kept weapons at home. That morning, however, he hadn't put on his prostheses and felt defenseless. When he heard a noise behind the bathroom door, he attacked it, trying to act quickly. Unfortunately, there was no burglar, only Riva, who had woken up and gone to the bathroom. Upon realizing her tragic mistake, she screamed for help, but it was too late. An investigation showed that Riva had been attacked 4 times. The first bullet struck her thigh, the second ricocheted and hit her back, the third shot hit her shoulder, and the final, fatal shot struck her head, killing her instantly. An investigation showed that Riva had been attacked 4 times. The first bullet struck her thigh, the second ricocheted and hit her back, the third shot hit her shoulder, and the final, fatal shot struck her head, killing her instantly. Early in the morning, Riva's family received a phone call that filled June, her mother, with dread. She hesitated to answer, knowing that calls at such an early hour often bring bad news. Inspector Bada delivered the heartbreaking information, causing her world to crumble. She struggled to stay upright as her legs gave way. Riva's father experienced several heart attacks after learning of her death. The next time they would see their daughter would be at the crematorium to say their goodbyes. Riva's mother, June, quickly informed the police of her concerns about Oscar, noting that her daughter and Oscar had ongoing issues. Although they were still in a relationship which had lasted only 3 months, it was clear that things were coming to an end. Riva's friend supported this perspective, revealing that Riva had expressed her desire to clarify their relationship on Valentine's Day and to break up amicably while remaining friends. Both the mother and friend shared similar views on the situation. In contrast, Oscar's friends expressed a different opinion, claiming that he was very happy in his relationship with Riva. The murder of Riva, a well-known model, by Oscar, a prominent Paralympic athlete, attracted significant media attention, leading to varying public opinions about the incident. Some people believed Oscar's explanation that the attack was accidental, while others suspected he may have had intentions to harm Riva. The authorities had not reached a consensus on Oscar's version of the incident. Many aspects of Oscar's story seemed to align with the details of his relationship with Riva. Friends of both Oscar and Riva stated that they were deeply in love, with Riva's friends confirming her happiness in this new relationship. She had previously experienced toxic relationships and felt fortunate to have found a good partner. Surveillance footage from a supermarket 2 days before the incident showed Oscar and Riva happily hugging and kissing while they shopped, appearing to be a couple in good spirits. This footage was presented as evidence during the investigation. However, a confusing detail emerged. Riva's friend claimed that she planned to visit Oscar's house on Valentine's Day to end their relationship, which raises questions. Why would she choose such a romantic day for a breakup? Additionally, during a police search of Oscar's home, they discovered a gift that Riva had prepared for him, a beautifully decorated frame with a collage of their happy moments together, accompanied by a heartfelt note expressing her love. This made it hard to believe that she intended to break up with him before giving such a romantic gift. The trial received significant media coverage, revealing an important detail. Oscar was deeply concerned about his safety and feared that someone might break into his house at night. This fear had troubled him since childhood, possibly inherited from his mother. After Oscar's parents separated, his mother and the children continued to live in a cottage where a thief had once broken in. Oscar, who has used prosthetic legs since birth, would take them off at home, leaving him vulnerable and unable to escape in an emergency. This fear was corroborated by Oscar's psychologist and his brother's friends. The weapon he had that morning was unlicensed and intended for self-defense. Riva's mother, June, informed the police that Riva's relationship with Oscar had recently taken a turn for the worse. A friend of Riva confirmed this, and several neighbors provided further insight. One woman testified that she heard Riva scream the night of the murder, describing it as a scream filled with fear, indicating that Riva was terrified for her life. Another neighbor, called as a witness by the defense, claimed he heard screams too, but he was convinced they were from a man, not a woman. Furthermore, during the trial, it was revealed that Riva was found on the bathroom floor, with the door locked and her mobile phone in hand. While it was normal for her to get up at night to use the bathroom, the locked door raises questions, particularly because she brought her phone with her. The prosecution investigated Oscar's history and discovered that years ago, he was involved in a serious boating accident on a river. He crashed into an obstacle and required immediate medical attention. Doctors performed surgery to repair his broken jaw and ribs, providing over 100 stitches. He was also diagnosed with a concussion and remained in a coma for several days. When police arrived at the scene, they found numerous empty beer bottles at the bottom of the boat. Eyewitnesses reported that Oscar was driving recklessly, screaming and laughing, while the boat sped down the river. After the accident, Oscar insisted he hadn't been drinking, but police tests revealed he was under the influence of alcohol. Additionally, it was revealed that Oscar had a long-standing problem with alcohol addiction. On March 3, 2014, the trial for the murder of Riva began. On September 12, Oscar Pistorius was found guilty of manslaughter because the judge determined that he did not intend to kill his girlfriend. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison. This sentence was considered lenient, and with good behavior, Oscar could have been released early. Over the years, Oscar gained many enemies and became concerned for his safety. The most notable adversary was prosecutor Jerry Nell, nicknamed Bull Terrier. After reviewing the case, he remarked, "Oscar is talking nonsense," and began searching for inconsistencies in Oscar's story. Jerry Nell, a dedicated professional, recognized that he was dealing with a man who had taken another person's life and sought true justice. After several court appeals, Jerry Nell succeeded in having Oscar's lenient sentence overturned. 2 years later, Oscar was back in court, facing charges of premeditated murder. Before the hearing began, the prosecutor wanted to speak with Oscar privately while he was under house arrest. He reminded Oscar that his home was protected by a 3-meter fence topped with electrified wire, along with an expensive security system and numerous motion sensors. Given this, where did the idea of a robber come from? The autopsy results showed that Riva had food in her stomach that she had eaten at 1 a.m., suggesting that she and Oscar had not gone to bed that night. The prosecutor suspected that Oscar was feeling jealousy toward Riva. As she prepared to leave, he became enraged. When Riva locked herself in the bathroom out of fear, he began attacking. This raised several questions. Why did Oscar start attacking? Why didn't he call the police if he believed a robber was in the bathroom? And why did he continue to attack after the first shot, especially when he heard Riva's screams? Overwhelmed by the prosecutor's portrayal of that night, Oscar struggled to respond. Jerry Nell assured Oscar that they would address many unanswered questions in court. The trial eventually took place, resulting in the judge sentencing Oscar Pistorius to 6 years in prison, a sentence that was similar to the original one. Oscar's lawyers later filed an appeal, which led to an increase in his sentence to 13 years and 6 months. As of 2023, Oscar can apply for parole, but he is still serving time in prison. Despite his repeated requests to be transferred to a different facility due to his fear of potential violence from other inmates, these requests were never granted. This marked the end of Oscar Pistorius' sporting career and public admiration. He was once a national hero, but his actions not only took the lives of others but also ruined his own promising future. Lorraine Cox was a 32-year-old woman living in Exeter, UK. She is dating a man named Ellie who lives in Scotland. Although the distance between them is quite long, they have gotten used to it. At first, they only met on weekends and talked, but gradually their feelings for each other grew deeper. By 2020, they had been in contact in this way for 2 years. Despite the challenges of the distance, they decided to get engaged. Now, they are building a future together and preparing for their wedding. Lorraine is also planning to have their first child. However, in early 2020, their plans had to change for several reasons. By February, Lorraine had moved to Scotland to be with Ellie, where she obtained a temporary visa, and they spent considerable time together. When summer arrived, she wanted to return to Exeter to visit her family and friends for a month or two. This trip was not a breakup, she simply missed her loved ones. Afterward, she intended to return to Scotland and continue strengthening their relationship. Although restrictions in the UK remained strict, they were gradually relaxing, allowing public events to resume and many establishments to reopen. People eagerly took to the streets to socialize again, and Lorraine was no exception. On September 1, 2020, she arrived at her father's house in Exeter, excited to reconnect with friends. They spent the evening visiting several bars, enjoying drinks and good company, until they realized it was time to go home. Everyone left in a good mood. On September 2, Lorraine posted an unusual message on social media, claiming she was going to leave the country. This surprised everyone, as her only previous move had been to Scotland, and she had no plans to relocate again. She had just arrived to visit her father and intended to stay for at least a month. This sudden change in her mood and plans seemed out of character. In her post, Lorraine mentioned wanting to move about 50 kilometers from her father's house to a place called Plymouth, which she described as the first stop on her planned journey. This behavior was shocking because Lorraine was not known for making impulsive decisions, especially on such a significant scale. She had a stable life and a loving relationship in Scotland and had never mentioned wanting to move elsewhere. Now, she was considering a move toward France. Unsurprisingly, this post had a deep impact on Ellie. They had a strong relationship, making his fear of losing her understandable. Lorraine's friends bombarded her with questions. Initially, she responded willingly, but as the conversation progressed, her tone changed and mistrust grew. Those who knew her well noticed shifts in her writing style. She began using unfamiliar emojis, making odd mistakes, and her messages conveyed a sense of hostility. This worried her loved ones, as she had always maintained positive relationships with them, and there was no reason for her to display such aggression or undergo drastic life changes. Her father, Tony, who was hosting her during this time, even showed a family friend her old messages alongside the new ones. He pointed out clear inconsistencies in her writing style. Even those who didn't know her well noticed something was off. Throughout this time, Lorraine's boyfriend, who was named Ellie, was especially concerned and tried to understand her behavior. Initially, she responded to him with short, cold replies, but eventually, her answers became even more abrupt. The conversation ended when Lorraine sent him an emoji of a middle finger. This intensified the suspicion that someone else was using her account. Ellie had known Lorraine for 2 years, so the idea that the trip was related to a breakup or conflict seemed unlikely. They valued each other, which made her odd responses even more perplexing. Unfortunately, because of the distance, her boyfriend felt helpless and unable to intervene. A situation arose concerning Tony, Lorraine's father. Determined to discover the truth, he faced a challenge because he was away at the time and couldn't check his daughter's room for clues. Instead, he began speaking to Lorraine's friends, particularly those who had been with her the day before her sudden move to Plymouth. He was scheduled to return home the next day. Upon arriving home, Tony's first action was to go to Lorraine's room, where his suspicions grew stronger. He had already spoken with her close friends, and they all confirmed that no one had seen Lorraine since their breakup at the bar when everyone had left for the night. Inside Lorraine's room, it appeared as though she had never returned after her outing with friends. Her belongings from Scotland remained untouched, and nothing was missing from her room. It looked as if she had left for an extended trip without taking any of her things, which seemed impossible. The most alarming discovery was the bag she had left behind. Lorraine had diabetes and always carried a first aid kit to monitor her blood sugar levels. Her health depended on these supplies, and she never went anywhere, even for a quick trip to the store, without them. For outings like the one to the bar, she typically used a smaller bag. The fact that her larger kit was still in her room raised serious concerns about her recent plans. Tony realized that his daughter had not returned from the party, leading him to fear that something might have happened to her health. The messages she had exchanged with friends and relatives also seemed troubling. Worried, Tony sent another message to Lorraine on social media, expressing concern for her health and asking if she was okay. He warned her that if she did not respond, he would have to contact the police. The message was seen, but he received no reply. After that, Tony's and Lorraine's friends could no longer tolerate the uncertainty and began their search. They started by looking for clues in the bar where they had spent the evening on September 2nd. They interviewed witnesses, distributed flyers, and retraced the presumed route Lorraine would have taken home. It was clear that something alarming must have happened during her journey since she never came home again. Law enforcement and journalists quickly became involved. They were skeptical of the theory that Lorraine might have suffered a health crisis. Detectives believed that if that were the case, she would not have been able to send messages to her friends. Furthermore, several days had passed since her disappearance, and she would likely have been found in a hospital, but tests of recent admissions yielded no results. It appeared far more likely that Lorraine had encountered danger from someone. Journalists rushed to report on the situation, highlighting concerns over Lorraine's disappearance. They recalled that in May 2018, 2 years before Lorraine vanished, an attacker named Robert Proud had attacked a woman who strikingly resembled her. He had abused her but did not kill her, and then evaded capture for a long time. Given his criminal history, it raised fears that there could be more victims. Although he had completed his prison sentence, investigators began considering Lorraine as a potential victim. At the time of her disappearance, Robert was living near the path Lorraine would have taken home. This connection led to his arrest, and police sought to extract a confession from him. They believed he had kidnapped, abused, and possibly killed her, and that he might have disposed of her body. It was suspected that he took her phone and pretended to communicate with her friends and family to buy himself time and create confusion. There was another theory regarding Lorraine's disappearance. Some believed that Robert might have attacked her, but instead of dying, she was hiding to avoid becoming his victim again. The detectives prioritized finding Lorraine because she was clearly in danger. Robert might have been holding her hostage. The situation could have escalated, posing a significant threat. To test this theory, they began reviewing surveillance footage from cameras along Lorraine's potential route that night. Even after narrowing down the time frame, they had about 11,000 hours of footage from over 400 cameras across 120 different locations. Analyzing this footage was time-consuming, but it proved worthwhile, yielding the first clues needed to catch the criminal. Eventually, they spotted a girl who matched Lorraine's description in the recordings. After leaving her friends at the bar, she headed toward her father's house without making any turns. She almost made it home, but a few blocks away, something caught her attention: a kebab shop on the ground floor of an apartment building, which was open at night. Lorraine went inside, likely to grab a snack, and then left to eat on a bench before continuing her way home. Around 2:45 a.m., she returned to the kebab shop, but this time accompanied by an unfamiliar man. This raised alarms because he didn't appear to be just a random passerby. The footage suggested they had interacted, and he had managed to get her attention. The police continued to investigate the recordings and noted that the young man had been following Lorraine after they left the shop. This behavior was concerning, especially since she seemed to be walking voluntarily and the street was deserted. Detectives suspected the man might be a predator who targeted his victim, potentially involved in Lorraine's disappearance and the messages she had sent to her loved ones after the incident. He maintained a distance while following her, trying to remain inconspicuous, and seemed to be assessing the situation. It looked as though he was stalking her, especially since she appeared intoxicated and was stumbling. She had a valuable phone, and with no one accompanying her that night, he saw an opportunity to attack. The police attempted to locate another recording to determine how Lorraine left the building from at least one camera, but were unsuccessful. It appeared she had not exited at all. They spent considerable time reviewing the video footage, only to confirm that Lorraine had not left since she was last seen. The detectives concluded that she might still be inside, possibly being held against her will. Unfortunately, by the time they gathered this information, 8 days had passed. Given this long duration, only a miracle could save Lorraine, who suffered from diabetes. Nevertheless, her family held on to hope. The police obtained a clear photo of the man who accompanied and followed Lorraine that night. They printed it out and began distributing it through the media to attract witnesses. Initially, they visited the kebab shop and spoke with the owner. He informed them that he lived above the shop but had rented the apartment below to a young man about a month ago. This young man had moved in unofficially and was very withdrawn, to the extent that the owner didn't know much about him. The owner even expressed doubts about the young man's name. When police officers visited the apartment, they anticipated finding a crime scene. However, everything was surprisingly neat and clean. The young man living there identified himself as Christopher Mayer and showed them his identification. There was no sign of Lorraine in the apartment, and he allowed the detectives inside without any resistance. They inspected the place thoroughly to ensure that no one was being held against their will. Christopher was then shown a photo of Lorraine, along with a CCTV image in which a man resembling him was seen accompanying her to the house. He strongly denied any connection, claiming that he did not know her. However, the clear photograph made the police skeptical, as the similarities were unmistakable. A brief verbal confrontation ensued, with Christopher maintaining his stance. During this exchange, he insisted that he would never bring a strange woman to his apartment. The police then became interested in Christopher's mobile phone, which they seized for examination. They discovered that it contained Lorraine's SIM card, although the card was currently missing. This evidence confirmed that he had at least seen her recently. Further investigation revealed that a suspicious post had been made on Lorraine's social media account using this mobile phone. It appeared that Christopher had sent strange messages to her loved ones. After the unsettling incident, whatever it was, he had taken Lorraine's phone. Rather than using it for communication, he inserted a SIM card into his own phone to access her contact list and social media account. This raised further suspicions about Christopher. He was the last person confirmed to have seen Lorraine alive, and his attempts to manipulate her account seemed suspicious. It became clear that he was trying to cover his tracks, raising questions about his motives that the authorities still needed to uncover. Christopher was arrested and charged with the kidnapping of Lorraine Cox. That same day, forensic experts arrived at his apartment to investigate. They used a substance called luminol to carefully examine the area. While they found several suspicious traces of evidence, the most alarming findings were in a nearby alley. During their search of the apartment, they discovered blood and numerous signs that supported the theory that Lorraine was dead, particularly around a garbage can. The forensic team speculated that Christopher might have disposed of evidence by throwing away the body. They searched the alley and found a large plastic bag inside one of the trash containers that contained human remains. However, it was not a complete body. Some parts, including the torso and head, were missing, making identification difficult. Consequently, the case shifted from a missing persons investigation to a murder investigation, and the work continued. Detectives learned that on the night of Lorraine's disappearance, in addition to Christopher, 5 other young men were present. However, none appeared on the CCTV footage with Lorraine. These men likely entered the apartment to buy food or for other reasons, but their involvement needed further investigation. They could have unwittingly been present during the crime or could have assisted in covering up evidence. Notably, the group behaved very differently. Except for Christopher, everyone was cooperative and willing to provide information. Upon further investigation, the 5 other young men were found to be locals who lived nearby. Since there was no evidence against them, they were released. In stark contrast, Christopher was uncooperative, reluctant to talk, and often gave vague or confusing answers. He seemed to believe that the police lacked sufficient evidence against him, but they soon discovered that his real name was Azam Mangori. This revelation marked a turning point in the investigation, as detectives confronted him with the truth, signaling the beginning of the unraveling of his story. Azam claims that he changed his name because he was born in the Kurdistan region of Iraq, where people who do not follow tradition can face severe punishment, including being stoned to death. As an adult, he left his conservative homeland but still lives in fear of being hunted down and killed. To avoid this dangerous situation, he began calling himself Christopher. He had been living illegally in the UK since December 2018 to avoid returning to Iraq. Azam also possessed a high-quality fake ID under the name Christopher Mayer to evade detection by immigration authorities. This explains why the landlord knew almost nothing about the man. He was very cautious, had not attended school or worked anywhere, and lived off odd jobs. However, the interrogation ended abruptly. After admitting to these things, he refused to talk about Lorraine. His previous admissions were not significant to the police. DNA testing confirmed that the remains found in a trash bin were those of Lorraine. In Azam's apartment, DNA traces and other evidence indicated that Lorraine had been killed there because Azam had failed to clean thoroughly. The police also discovered a large handsaw and replacement blades purchased after the crime. Other items found included a driver's license, a debit card, and a wallet, all mutilated. Nearby trash bins contained bloody clothing, Lorraine's phone, and a SIM card discarded in the sewer. Unfortunately, parts of her body were never recovered. Detectives analyzed the location data from Azam's mobile phone on the day of Lorraine's murder and the subsequent days when he disposed of evidence. This investigation led them to a location on the city's outskirts known as Tin Pit Hill. During the search, they found Lorraine's torso and head, which were not well concealed. Investigators noted unsettling details. A piece of clothing was stuffed into her mouth, and a patch of skin was missing from her back, possibly taken as a trophy by the perpetrator. Unfortunately, no other body parts were located, and the remains were in an advanced state of decomposition, complicating the determination of the cause of death. The forensic expert concluded that Lorraine had likely been strangled. Despite strong evidence of his guilt, Azam continued to deny his involvement and created false stories. He even attempted to involve banned organizations in the case. The trial commenced in spring 2021. Although he never confessed, Azam and his defense team significantly altered his narrative. He now claimed to have a normal orientation and stated that he encountered Lorraine when she came to his place late at night after a bar visit. He approached her on the street and convinced her to come to his apartment for some intimacy. Azam maintained that Lorraine voluntarily came to his apartment after drinking heavily and using illegal substances. He claimed that after trying those substances himself, he experienced severe distortion of perception and lost consciousness. When he regained awareness, he found Lorraine in the bathroom, unresponsive. He alleged that he saw a puddle of urine beneath her and believed she had overdosed. Azam attempted to perform CPR, but it was unsuccessful. In a panic and without knowing the emergency number, he sat on the bathroom floor next to her body. Hallucinations then began, and he claimed to see dark creatures emerging from her mouth, prompting him to shove a piece of his t-shirt into her mouth to stop it. He pushed the cloth in so far that it could have caused her to choke. Despite being in a state of panic, he managed to find and send a video he had recorded around the same time to a friend, where he appeared calm and even exhaled smoke into the camera. He explained that he filmed the video to help himself calm down. His behavior grew increasingly bizarre. Instead of calling for help, he decided to dispose of the body and planned to flee from his relatives. Naturally, this account sounded implausible, leaving him with no solid defense. According to Azam, he was unsure what he would do after Lorraine died and kept her body in his apartment until he decided to dispose of it. When his anxiety reached its peak, he chose to throw it away. He called a taxi to take the bag with the remains to a wooded area on the outskirts of Exeter. Prosecutors noted that he seemed to be obsessed with amputation, as evidenced by the precise cuts he made, which horrified forensic experts. It was clear he had researched this topic extensively and was well prepared. That evening, Azam tried to connect with people on an escort website, seeking companionship but was unsuccessful. Later, he saw Lorraine on the street eating alone and viewed her as an ideal target. It seems that Azam may have premeditated this murder to fulfill his dark fantasies. Even with substantial evidence against him, his trial lasted 5 weeks. Ultimately, the jury found him guilty of murder and attempting to obstruct justice. He received a life sentence but is eligible for parole after 20 years, which means he could be released at the age of 44. Lorraine's boyfriend, Ellie, experienced profound grief, stating that a part of him died with her. He lives daily with this pain and struggles against despair. Lorraine's father, Tony, organized a charity march to rally support for his daughter. Participants silently walked the route she would have taken from the bar to her home, a journey she never completed. In the aftermath, Tony became an activist advocating for more CCTV cameras on UK streets to help prevent and solve violent crimes. He also started to make regular donations to an anti-abuse organization based in the UK. Even after justice was served, Lorraine Cox's family remained uncertain about how Ozzum was able to lure her into his apartment. Security footage showed her following him willingly. Ozzum claimed that he engaged her in conversation and offered her alcohol and a banned substance, which she accepted. However, toxicology reports found no traces of banned substances in her system, and a forensic expert stated that she did not die from diabetes, suggesting that Ozzum's account might be false. Sadly, the truth about what happened in his apartment may never be revealed, as only Ozzum and Lorraine know what truly occurred. Some believe Ozzum exploited Lorraine's kindness by asking for help, and that she may have felt unable to refuse, ultimately leading her into a dangerous situation.